Welcome to r/Am I the Jerk, where Karen's not happy about her boyfriend's Rolex watches. Am I the jerk for getting angry when my girlfriend wore one of my Rolex watches and criticized my spending habits? I'm 22, male, and she's 23. I've been collecting high-end watches for several years now. It's a hobby that I'm passionate about, having invested lots of money into my collection. 2 days ago, we were at my apartment and I was in the bathroom. I came back to find her wearing one of my most expensive watches. She was on the couch, and when she saw me, all she asked was how it looked on her. I immediately got upset and angry, and I told her that she should have asked me before wearing it. She was somehow surprised and asked me why it was such a big deal. To be fair, she knows close to nothing about watches, and especially this brand, Rolex. So I tried explaining to her how valuable and delicate it is, and that I like it to be handled carefully. Then she got even more upset, questioning why I would spend that much money on a watch instead of investing it or saving it. She didn't know about my financial background to be able to afford this, as we've only been dating for a month now. She felt lied to, asking why I didn't tell her this until now. Since then, there has been tension between us, IRL and by texting. I'm not sure what to think. Am I the jerk? Edit. Some points people keep asking. I recently moved here from outside America. I don't have a safe, don't have most of my watches with me yet. The watches are on a shelf in my bedroom in their boxes and cases. I was in the bathroom for 15 minutes to take a shower. She was in the kitchen when I left, and the couch she was on is in the living room, which is connected to the kitchen. Not the jerk, but it's close. This is a boundaries thing. She shouldn't just be taking and using your stuff without asking, and she absolutely shouldn't be giving you the cold shoulder afterwards. However, as you said yourself, she doesn't know anything about watches and didn't understand how expensive this piece was. You say you got upset and angry. This is where you might have strayed a little closer to being the jerk. How badly did you blow up at her? Bearing in mind, she thought she was just borrowing a watch and might have been trying to show interest in something that you're clearly interested in. OP. I just asked her to put it down. I didn't shout or scream, but I think my tone was off. I'd say maybe you two just aren't a match. Replicas of fancy watches are common, and that's probably what she thought it was, and didn't realize it was such a big deal. I'd suspect she was actually trying to flirt with you, albeit misguidingly. But if your tone is off, that's probably what she reacted to. She might have just been trying to show an interest in your hobbies and didn't realize how expensive it was. She knows nothing of watches, as you mentioned, so it might be hard to grasp that you're casually leaving a Rolex laying about. I would put the watches in a safe. What if you guys broke up and she packs one or all of them in a moment of spite and anger? My ex took all of my old records with him, claiming he didn't see any of mine in his records. There were some classics in there. He just wanted to get back at me for kicking him out, which I did because he wasn't loyal. Not the jerk. OP. I'm so sorry that happened to you. I'll try, but I don't think she's the type of person to steal. You've been dating for a month. You have no clue what kind of person she is, and she already showed you she doesn't really respect your property. I'm not trying to be cruel, but my ex stole about $3,000 worth of valuables from me and racked up another $250 of debt in my name. And all of this after 4 years of dating and a proposal. Just saying, be careful. Well, who do you think is the jerk? OP or his girlfriend? Please let us know. Welcome to America, buddy boy. Leaving a Rolex out around someone you've been dating for a month? Something tells me you're going to be learning some lessons here that you weren't expecting. Am I the jerk for telling my brother's girlfriend that he had a vasectomy? My brother Mark, who's 40, won the lottery when he was 20. It was $1,000 a week for life. He was young and wanted to travel. He dropped out of school and has spent his entire adulthood basically seeing the world. He comes home to visit every few years, and we FaceTime with him when we can. He doesn't travel first class or stay in expensive resorts, so he has actually built up some nice savings. He came home with a girlfriend, Haley, who's 28 this year. They met when they got stuck in South America during lockdown. She's been traveling since she graduated from university and works from a laptop. I, 54, live in the same city where I was born. I love it here. I love being close to my parents, my grandkids, and most of my siblings. Mark hated being the youngest of 8 and always swore he would not have kids. Our parents were older when they had him, and they didn't have the energy for him, truth be told. Mark came home when he was 30 and told us all that he had a vasectomy and that he would not be contributing to the world population. Haley is a pretty young thing, and she is also very intelligent and sweet. I can understand why anyone would fall in love with her. We were having a family barbecue to celebrate Mark being in town. There were maybe 30 people in my parents' yard and house. I was talking to Haley about her future plans now that the world has opened up again. She said that she was ready to settle down and start a family. I asked if they were planning on adopting from one of the countries they had traveled to or if they would try in North America. She said that they had talked about it and would be having at least one of their own. This may be where I messed up. I asked where Mark got his vasectomy reversed or if they were having in vitro fertilization. She went very quiet and went over to Mark. They spoke and then they left. Mark called me later that night to scream at me for ruining his life. He hadn't told her and he was planning on just continuing to travel and maybe adopt if they decided on it. He said I shared private medical information and that he never wanted to see me again. I apologized over and over. I seriously had no way of knowing that he was planning a future with this girl without telling her a pretty big piece of the puzzle that might be missing. I feel bad for him, but I think he should have told her. Not the jerk. Your brother is a self-centered jerk. He was just going to lie and string that poor girl along. Thank you so much for telling her the truth, even if it was an accident. Shame on him. Please tell everyone he dates that he has had a vasectomy. Update. My brother now refuses to visit our parents if I'm around. So it wasn't that he was planning on reversing his vasectomy or anything. He planned to just lead her on until it was too late for her to have kids. He came by this summer with his girlfriend and I stayed away. I guess he told this one that he and I have a bad relationship and that I'm jealous of his riches after his lottery win. I'm not going to do anything about it, but I hope she finds out before he ruins her future as well. Sort of a funny thing though, his lottery money may run out soon. It turns out that he should have paid more attention. The money he won, $1,000 a week for life, was actually only for 25 years. He does have savings, so he shouldn't be destitute or anything, but he also does not have a pension or anything. I'm interested in seeing what happens in 4 years from now. You might have spilled the beans, but it looks like his secret was bound to come out sooner or later anyway. It's cool that you're not trying to get involved, but hoping his girlfriend finds out shows that you still care about her. Where were your parents in all of this? If I knew my sons were this manipulative and deceitful, I'd be disgusted. I'd also be telling every single woman he brings home, which means they'd vanish, I'm sure. My ex got revenge on me in the worst way possible, and I have no way to clear my name. Last year, I cheated on my ex-girlfriend of 8 years, Annie, with my colleague, Jess, with whom I now have a 3-week-old son. I have no excuse. It cost me my job and the majority of my friendship, along with the love of a good woman. I deserved it all, and I have never expected any sympathy for my actions. Annie delivered my stuff to my parents' house before I even knew she was aware of the cheating. She didn't confront me, she just cut me out of her life without a word. I messaged everyone we knew, begging them to ask her to talk to me, and I sent hundreds of messages telling her how much I regretted everything and wanted her back. I never got a response. Jess saw the messages, which caused issues between us initially, but she fell pregnant quickly, so we moved past it for the sake of our family, which we both wanted. I am 100% committed to the relationship and haven't even looked at another woman since things settled down. In the final stretch of Jess's pregnancy, about a month ago, I saw Annie in a shop for the first time since the breakup. She was pretty cold towards me, but mentioned that a few months ago, she found a keychain my granddad got me when I was very young. It's not valuable, but she knows it means a lot to me. She said I could come collect it the following Saturday morning. I explained that was 6 days after Jess was due to give birth, so I'd probably need to be home, but she said I could either get it on Saturday or it would go in the bin, so I agreed on a time to go over. My son was born a few days late, but he's perfectly healthy and wonderful, so he was less than 24 hours old on the Saturday I needed to collect the keychain. I planned to stop by on the way to the hospital, but when I got to my old house, Annie invited me in to talk about how things ended between us. I thought we had a good conversation and that both of us walked away with closure. She let me apologize for the way I treated her, wished me the best with my new family, and hugged me as I left. I admit I held on tightly for the hug, but it was purely because of the relief, not lingering feelings. I spent less than an hour at her house and then headed to the hospital. I didn't tell Jess about any of this. Oh, come on, man. Come on, you should have told her about it. I didn't tell Jess about any of this because I know she still feels insecure about Annie, but I didn't want to add fuel to that. When I arrived at the hospital after seeing Annie, Jess had revoked my access, and the ward manager wouldn't tell me why. I ended up being removed by a security guard because I was denied seeing my son for the second time and didn't respond well to being blindsided. I tried calling Jess and her mom over and over. The only response I got was a screen recording of a message from Annie. It was a doorbell footage of me walking through the door at 9:30, then back out at 10:15. The hug is only partly caught, so it does look like we could have been kissing. The message Annie sent with it said, "Did he even shower and change his clothes between hooking up with me and going to see the baby? Congratulations on being stuck with him for the next 18 years. I hope it's everything you dreamed of." No one believes this is a setup at all. It's something I would never have expected from Annie, and no one else would either, so they're completely rejecting the idea that this is a lie. I sent her a message asking why she did this, assuming I'd still be blocked. Her response was that she wasn't going to let me play innocent and that I may have deleted all of our messages over the past few months, but she hasn't. Obviously, there are no messages, but she blocked me again right after, so I have nothing to exonerate myself with. She waited in silence for almost a year and then took the most cruel and vindictive revenge she possibly could. I have only met my son once, minutes after he was born, and now Jess is refusing any contact with me and won't let me see him. Courts will take months, and my heart hurts every minute of the day. I know what I did to Annie was horrible, but I don't deserve this. I have no one to talk to about it because not even my own mother believes me. Her only question was why I ruined my life with a baby when Annie was willing to reconcile, and that's about the most supportive thing she said to me since I was dumped. The few friends who stuck with me are assuming the worst too, and it's destroying me that not a single person I know sees this for what it is. Everything is ruined. The fact that you withheld the information because of what you perceived as her insecurities was really your insecurities with a painful truth you kept from your wife. Had you been honest about why you were going in the first place, and had someone gone with you, she may have been mad, but she'd have no reason to be insecure about Annie. You walked into a trap of your own creation. Sorry, honesty is the best policy. Why are you trying to make it out like you had no choice but to lie? You could have told Jess at any time. Her being insecure is an excuse. The mistress being insecure is hilarious because she had zero problems with helping you mess up Annie's relationship with you, but you can't even mention Annie's name to her. Good on Annie. Both you and Jess are going to get the lives that you deserve. The fact that your own mother doesn't believe you suggests that you've had this coming for a long time. That had to be the most satisfying revenge story we've ever read. That was good. I just wish I knew Annie so I could ask her if she was okay. What? I'd be like, "Annie, are you okay? Are you okay? Are you okay, Annie?" Oh, I hate you, Reddit boy. You don't want to pay the estimate? That's fine, ma'am. Enjoy your day. For context, the software development company I used to intern at uses a sheet to estimate the cost of building a certain software or update for a client. This sheet includes details like the employees working on the project, how long they estimate it will take, and other relevant factors. After an intern goes around the departments collecting this info from various employees, we then calculate the cost and send it to the client to either accept or reject. Note, since our company is so popular in the area, we sometimes have a pretty long queue. So if you reject the estimate, chances are you might have to wait in the queue all over again to request a new one. One day things were slow, and they mostly had me man the phones and go on coffee runs, typical intern stuff. Then a client calls in saying she wants a piece of clock-in software for her employees so she can more accurately track their work hours. By this point in my internship, I had completed at least 4 of 5 of these sheets, and I had been taught by my supervisor how to identify which departments would be needed for which projects. So after gathering the details from the client, I hang up and translate the needs for the employees, essentially explaining it in programmer jargon. Half an hour later, I'm done with the sheet, and I check the calculations 3 times. I then email it to the client, and I swear, not even 2 minutes later, I get an "estimate rejected" message on the company smartphone I was given. She added a reply stating, "This estimate is non-compliable with me." So I respond with, "We're sorry to hear that, ma'am. Please enjoy the rest of your day." And then I go about my business. Roughly an hour later, she emails again asking, "Is that all you have to say?" By this point, I realized what she was trying to do, and I reported to my supervisor that Miss Karen was trying to haggle the price. My supervisor calls Karen's phone and asks if she would like to have the estimate resent to her so she can accept it. Karen outright tells her that she wants a cheaper price, to which my supervisor responds that the price is non-negotiable and to take it as is. Karen then uses her signature move of, "Let me speak to your manager." But my supervisor simply informed her that she'd get the same response and just hung up on her. Karen eventually called back and even showed up at the building to renegotiate the price, but was shot down. However, she managed to get a meeting with the manager to file a complaint for poor customer service and unprofessional behavior. My supervisor and I were called in and asked for our side of the exchange. We simply provided the chat log and the proof that she had rejected the estimate initially sent to her. She had no color in her face after those were revealed, and she couldn't even look at him. She was blacklisted from our company and was recommended to try other companies instead. So many people undervalue programming. I get that a lot as a web developer. When I give a quote on a website, and being just one person, my overhead is pretty low and I'm probably cheaper than a lot of others. I also have some custom modules that help me build faster. Anywho, 1 in every 10 to 15 people will balk at such a high price for a website and say they can get it cheaper somewhere else, or do it themselves on WordPress or Wix. I've learned to just smile and say, okay, no problem, good luck. More than half the time, they come back to me to fix their website because they can't figure it out or accept my original quote. Because it's just typing on a computer, people who are not technically inclined don't see value in what we do. I didn't take a weekend course to learn what I do. I did 2.5 years at university and 20 plus years of experience. I'm not mashing away at my keyboard to make a site. Okay, HR, he's your problem now. This tale revolves around my time as a supervisor in a call center, an employee who didn't like me named Jamers, and my malicious compliance with HR. Jamers was a new hire, probably about 21 at the time. A young kid, you could tell grew up privileged and entitled. But hey, I didn't do the hiring, and everyone deserves a chance starting out somewhere. I just wish this guy had been hired somewhere else. Now, I prided myself on being a fair guy, friendly and understanding. Jamers, however, was always the victim, and nothing was ever his fault. Customer complained about his service? Not his fault. Gave incorrect information? He was told the wrong information. Called off work? Something had come up beyond his control. On and on it went with him. Nothing was ever his fault. The issue with me came to a head when I had to correct him on the call he took. The information he gave was so incorrect and potentially damaging to the client that I had to call the client and give them the correct information while apologizing for the misinformation. Company policy at the time caused this to be an automatic write-up. I brought Jamers into the office, door open mind you, to tell him that he was being written up and why. At first, he started with every excuse in the book. Then he began asking why I was being hostile and mean. I wasn't. And why I was yelling. Again, I wasn't, and the door was left open, so there would have been multiple witnesses. He refused to sign the write-up. That's fine. It would go in his file regardless. As we were done, he marched up to HR. About half an hour later, HR called me into their office. They asked me why I yelled and used that language with him. What? Now, my bad for not having another supervisor with me when writing him up, but everyone would have heard me yelling had it happened. I'm a big guy and my voice carries. I denied this, of course. HR told me they were throwing out this write-up since, to them, it wasn't a big issue. This act effectively neutered me, which caused ripple effects. It was now known that if I did my job, HR would just reverse anything I did. HR also told me that from here on out, if Jamers had an issue or infraction, they would handle it. Okay, so here's where the malicious compliance comes into play. They had zero idea how many side conversations and other crap I had to deal with when it came to Jamers. Needed to call off? Sorry, go talk to HR. Got a complaint? I'd tell him to go to HR, and I'd send them an email explaining why. Requesting a day off to HR he went. It became a fact that HR had to deal with him once or twice a day for months. Anything even slightly minor, I sent him to HR. I know it was driving them insane, as they hated to be bothered. Finally, HR asked me to have a meeting with them. They told me Jamers called off, and he was going to be put on a final, and they wanted me to do it. I reminded them they had asked to be put in charge of him. We came to a compromise, as I wanted to play nice, and decided we both would handle it. Jamers was brought into the office and told he was being put on a final for attendance. But it wasn't his fault, he cried. He had to go to the doctor. HR asked for his doctor's excuse. He said he would bring it in tomorrow. The next day, Jamers came into HR and said, "This isn't working out. I quit." HR got a hint of what I dealt with, and the trash took itself out. I love justice. But no other hotel has ever had this problem before. Ma'am, I highly doubt that. So Janet came in that night with her husband and young teenager. Everything was going fine. I had her ID and was adding her information to the reservation. Then she handed me the credit card. There's a reason we ask for your credit card before we give it back and have you insert it into the machine. We need to check the name on it to make sure it's yours. It would be negligent for me to let you use any random credit card without checking it against your ID. That should be obvious. But Janet handed me this credit card, and lo and behold, it didn't have her name on it. It had a woman's name, so it obviously was not her husband's card. I double-checked the name against her ID just to make sure it wasn't her middle name. Nope, it sure wasn't. I politely asked Janet if someone had an ID that matched the name on the credit card. She immediately got defensive and said, "That's my mother's card, and she's paying for the room." Is she here with you right now? No. Then I'm sorry, but I can't use this card. No other hotel has ever had this problem before. Nobody else ever threw a fit about this but you. I don't think I'm the one throwing a fit here, but okay, lady. If she has an email address, I'm happy to send an authorization form for her to fill out and return along with a photo of her ID so that we can use that card. She scoffed and looked around like the situation was unbelievable before saying, "I am not doing that. No hotel has ever had this problem before." Okay, if we don't have an authorization form, I'm unable to use that card. Do you have another one? She rolls her eyes and dug through her wallet before pulling one out and tossing it across the desk. So of course, I, in turn, tossed her mom's card across the desk towards her in the same fashion. Two can play this game, jerk. This card did have her name on it, and I watched carefully as she stuck it in the machine just to make sure she didn't switch it when I gave it back. She grumbled about how ridiculous it was as she went to her room. Her husband never said a word. Her teenager looked fed up with everything. I had a feeling that this lady was a vindictive jerk, so I put a note in her reservation warning my coworkers not to change the card on file because it wasn't hers. And guess what? She came back in the morning and tried to switch the card to her mother's. My coworker, having seen the note, asked if it had her name on it. This lady exploded about how unfair and ridiculous it was and how no hotel had ever done this to her before. Buzz off, Janet. She was middle-aged, so I'd have to say that her mom is probably pretty old, and the way she kept saying, "No hotel has ever done this before," made me think that she had been staying in hotel after hotel on her mom's dime. Oh no, poor Janet can't financially exploit her elderly mother. Whatever will she do now? I'd be tempted to try to find out where she lives and report her for trying to do this with her mother's card. Well done. It's always something to me to see people get upset when they get called out for their shenanigans. Security protocols are in place for a reason. We don't pull them out to hurt people. They're there to protect people. You made the right call. People can be so entitled, especially with things they don't have to be responsible for. No hotel has ever had this problem before? Then you can leave and go to the other hotel that doesn't have a problem with you trying to commit fraud. So maybe I'm totally off base here, but is it really that uncommon for someone to use their family member's credit card? Like, I don't see how everyone's jumping to fraud just because the mom is trying to use grandma's credit card. My wife cheated and lost everything. Gonna preface this by stating that this happened 3 years ago. This isn't a throwaway account, but fake names will be used. Let's start with the frame of this story. I, 27 male, grew up like most guys under the assumption that the one is out there. That if you play your cards right, your soulmate will magically appear and you'll ride off into the sunset. When I was 19, I met a woman. Let's call her Bree. I met Bree through mutual friends while I was in the army. Bree was cute, quirky, seemed like a real overall good girl. Her friend, let's call her Sam, thought it would be a great idea to get us together as a couple. Not sure what her reasons were, but I was into her and she was into me. Bree was up for a few days visiting Sam, and I had just gotten back from leave in my home state, so the meetup was inevitable. We all had lunch. Myself, Bree, Sam, and Sam's husband, let's call him Jim. This meetup was nothing spectacular, but after Bree had flown home, she messaged me on Facebook and we hit it off. After roughly 3 weeks of talking to Bree, she hit me with a very strange question. If I was pregnant, what would you do? Now, before I get to my answer, let's do the math here. She was in her party years and got around frequently. I found that out way later in the relationship. She had a boyfriend a month before meeting me. I was adopted, so accepting a kid as my own seemed like a no-brainer. My answer was what seemed like the right thing. I will love that kid as if they were my own. Well, turns out she was showing a lot of signs of pregnancy. A week later, she took the test and was positive. I stood by my word. I'll take care of this kid. There was a 3-month gap between this revelation and when she decided to fly out to me. During this gap, she was very flaky, trying to see if she could get who she thought was the dad to commit and help her to take care of her kid. He never budged. She chose me instead. Yes, I understand now why staying with her was a bad idea. I was dumb, in love, and I believed she was the one and that she had come around eventually. I married her so that the army would cover the birth and the rest should have been history. But we all know it wasn't. Year 2. 2 years in, I noticed something a bit strange. Some guy, we'll call him Ron, was liking every post she put out and commenting on every photo that had the daughter in it. This seems odd. At this point in our marriage, I had gotten out of the military and was working a job in security. One night, while working, my lizard brain connected the dots and the gut feeling followed. Now, I'm not one to act on just suspicion. I need proof. Given that I was working a nightclub that night, I would get off at 4 in the morning. She'll be asleep. She leaves her laptop on the living room couch downstairs every night before bed. The plan is coming together. I get home, head to the couch. The laptop is there. I open it and take 2 guesses at the password. It's the birth year of our daughter. I go to her Facebook. I look in messages. There it is. 6 months of conversation with a guy named Ron. Some of the conversation is flirty. Some is banter about how useless and less of a man I am. The worst part, though, was the revelation that this guy is who she feels is the biological father, and she's trying to get him involved. I scroll and scroll until I can't stomach it anymore. I grab the laptop, take it upstairs, and set it on her with the screen shining in her face. As she slowly wakes up, I say, "We're talking about this in the morning," and walked back downstairs. She normally wakes up at 7, but didn't come down until 9, probably hoping I would be asleep on the couch. She begins by saying it was only friendly talk and not technically cheating. I called BS and told her that if I see this again, I'm gone. Now, I said if, but I knew better. It would be when. This is when I set my plan in motion. I dropped out of college to get a job in my field and made sure anything that was opened up under credit was under her name. I began stating that back where I'm from has a better economy and that we'd be better off there. It took 2 years of convincing, but it worked. Nothing was under my name, and we were set to go to my hometown in 6 months. We got there in May, and I sent her home to visit the next month. I knew what she would do and who she would do it with. There was a guy we met through Sam the day before we left, and I knew immediately that she was interested in him. 3 weeks after going to visit, she started acting strange again, prioritizing other things over me, putting things off, and becoming distant. Now, I spent 2 years setting the dominoes up. I just let her knock them over. I made sure I was jobless, had nothing to my name, and was home where I could fall back on family. I pressured her into admitting that she cheated, and the dominoes tumbled. I cut all funds that were being sent to the account, drained the account to file for divorce. I had nothing, so she couldn't take half. I had no job, so what lifestyle did we have that would require giving her alimony? Everything was in her name, so even though I had financial responsibility over some of those bills, the divorce lasted long enough to destroy her credit. I gave her everything and sacrificed much to raise her kid, but in the end, she lost the most. I'm now extremely successful and valued in my career. I'm not interested in marriage, but I have no shortage of women in my life. Life is good. I still have contact with the daughter, and Bree often flirts with me trying to get me back. I'm the only dad the kid has known, and I have no intentions of becoming an ex-dad. Even though getting back with her is emotionally tempting to be with the kid more, I know better and I have better options. Edit. My kid is supported above and beyond, despite no legal requirements to do more than just the minimum. Clothes, shoes, bed, games, toys, hobbies, I pay for it all. The kid is very much involved in my life, and she is provided for. I drop everything to talk to her, and I get involved in what she loves. I don't get to see her much, but there's very little that she longs for except living with me. The kid is mine, regardless of genetics. I made that investment in her life from the start, and I'm sticking to it. I worked very, very hard to keep her isolated from this revenge. She's happy and loves her daddy very much. I don't talk crap about her mom to her, and she has a healthy relationship with both of us. Even though she wishes mommy and daddy were together, she is understanding that it's not going to happen, and I'm working very hard to make sure that the impact of that is softened. Karen mother-in-law said my chili wasn't spicy enough, so I made it spicy for her. In my last relationship, I lived with my husband, Danny, in a duplex owned by his mother, Donna. We lived on one side, and his mother and brother lived on the other side. Donna was a very horrible person and took great joy in belittling me and tormenting me every chance she got. She took extra pride in herself if she succeeded in making me cry. My ex-husband is a professional cook and would often prepare enough food for his mother in addition to ourselves. On occasions, when I would do the cooking, she also expected to be served dinner. One thing I made often was chili. Both my ex and his mother loved my chili, but both liked their chili on the spicy side. I never made my chili spicy, as I have a sensitive stomach. My ex would just add hot sauce to his serving, and that was that. But Donna would complain endlessly about the chili not being spicy, even going so far as to demand I make the next batch of chili spicy for her. I told her I wasn't going to do that because I wouldn't be able to eat it. She essentially told me that what I wanted didn't matter, since she had been gracious enough to allow me to live in her home. I told her if she wanted it spicy, she could add hot sauce to it like my ex did, or she could just make her own darn chili. So next time my ex told her I was making chili, she came over while I was making it and watched me like a hawk, demanding I add this, that, and another thing. I told her I would be making my chili the way I wanted to, and she could go home and wait for it to be done, or find something else to eat. She left, and I continued tending to my chili. Now, my ex is somewhat of a hot sauce connoisseur, and he's never met a hot sauce that was too spicy for him. So the previous Christmas, I bought him a bottle of Carolina Reaper puree. When the chili was ready, he asked me to make a Tupperware container of chili for his mother while he used the bathroom, and he'd take it to her when he was done. So, like the good little wifey I was, I put the chili into the container with a heaping tablespoon of Carolina Reaper, mixed it up really well, added some shredded cheese on top, and closed it up, ready to be delivered next door. Ex finished in the bathroom, delivered the chili, and we sat down to our meal. We had just finished, approximately 30 minutes later, when his phone rang. My ex liked to have his conversations on speaker, and I was glad of it this time.
Danny, something is wrong.
What's wrong, Mom?
This chili. Oh, it's burning me up. What did your wife do to this chili?
Ex looks at me confused. I just shrug. She didn't do anything to it. It's just our normal chili. What did you add to it, Mom?
I added a little sriracha, but that shouldn't be hot like this.
Well, maybe you added too much.
That hateful jerk did something to my chili, Danny. I'm going to get her.
Calm down, Ma. You're overreacting.
I want her out of my house.
You can't kick her out over chili, Ma.
Watch me.
She hung up. My ex looked at me and asked, "Did you really do something to her chili?" I smiled sweetly and said, "She wanted it spicy. It's spicy." There were no real repercussions from this other than her losing it on me. Also, she was perfectly fine and never asked for my chili again. So, bonus. Entitled vegan roommate steals food and acts like she is the victim. So I, 21 male, am in my second year of uni, and I currently am rooming with 3 other people: Dan, 20 male, Max, 19 male, and Olivia, 20 female, all fake names. We all share a living area, kitchen, and of course a fridge. We all have a shelf space for our stuff and kind of share the rest of the fridge. Now in our group, I'm the only one that doesn't have any dietary requirements. Dan is gluten intolerant, Olivia is vegan by choice, and Max is mostly vegetarian because of a mixture of allergies and medical conditions. Me and Max are also in the same major and are close. When we all first moved in, Max noticed that some of his food kept getting moved to a different shelf, Olivia's shelf. Max has really bad social anxiety and doesn't do well with conflict, so he asked me to ask Olivia about it. When I did, she said she thought we had gotten the food for her because she's vegan. I explained that Max is vegetarian. I just said he's vegetarian because I didn't think it was my place to tell people about his medical conditions. She apologized and moved his food back and seemed happy to have someone else that understood. For the next few weeks, everything was fine. She did get a bit pushy every now and then with Max, saying that meat is the hard part and how easy it would be to stop eating milk and eggs, etc. Yesterday, we all decided to order takeout. We ordered Chinese. There's a beef-based dish that not only can Max eat, but it's also his favorite. So we got a portion for the group as well as one just for Max. We sat down and started eating, and when Olivia saw Max eating the dish, she went to get some. Max quickly stopped her and told her that it had beef in it. She sat there and blinked a few times before asking why he was eating it then. Max sheepishly replied that he can eat this dish. She started yelling that he can't make exceptions to veganism and vegetarianism when he feels like it. Max explained that he's vegetarian because of medical reasons. Olivia told him that he shouldn't call himself a vegetarian then, quickly filled her plate and went to her room. Today, Olivia refused to talk to anyone and would leave the room if Max came in. Max was clearly upset. I asked Dan to take him out somewhere while I talked to Olivia because I couldn't promise she wouldn't yell again. They left and I knocked on Olivia's door and asked to talk. She let me in and I told her that the way she's been treating Max is not okay. She said she felt lied to. She thought she had someone who cared about the same things that she did. I told her that it's okay to feel that way, but that's not Max's fault and what she's doing is wrong. She yelled at me, saying it was in fact Max's fault for misappropriating the label vegetarian and started comparing it to crimes. I shut that down right away and left to join Dan and Max, who had gone to the arcade. When me, Max, and Dan got back, the place was a mess. Max's stuff had been thrown into the living area. This also included some of his gaming equipment and medical stuff, which had been damaged. Any meat product had been opened and thrown in the trash. Empty milk cartons in the sink, which were full, so I think she tipped them. Her shelf in the fridge was empty and anything that was vegan friendly. So most of Max's food, but also some of Dan's food, was also gone. There were 2 rooms on one side and 2 rooms on the other, and she and Max's rooms were next to each other. We called our RA, and she was really nice and calm, probably because Max was crying at this point. She said she would talk to Olivia and would probably have her moved because this wasn't appropriate. We're hoping she gets moved. She hasn't been back yet today. We just finished moving Max's stuff into Dan's room and setting up a fusion just in case. We literally did our food shop a few days ago, so we don't really have enough money to replace anything. Anyway, sorry, this was a bit of a rant.
Maybe you guys should call the police and tell them there's a wild vegan on the loose.
You're really just going to stand there? I'm from South Louisiana, and we have a different way of interacting with people that differs even from other southern states. I'm sure people know about the southern hospitality, but South Louisiana cranks this up to 11. Ask anyone who has ever been there. We don't care about race, religion, social, or economic status. If you're human, you are owed to be treated with kindness and empathy until you prove otherwise. I left Baton Rouge and moved to Katy, Texas for a teaching gig. It was a Sunday, and I had to run to the Texas-only big grocery chain to get a few things. Sunday was a big shopping day, and the place was packed with long lines waiting to check out. I walked to the closest line with my few groceries in my arms. This was before the prominence of self-checkout, so no matter how much or how little you bought, there was going to be a wait. It's just how things were. No biggie. The lady in front of me had to be in her 80s and not more than 95 pounds. Her buggy was absolutely filled to the top. The people in front of her were almost done checking out when I saw her struggling to pick up a bag of frozen chicken to place on the conveyor. She struggled again with another item, and another, and another. The cashier started ringing her up and simply stared at her with impatience while this poor old woman struggled with removing items from her buggy. I was like, what the heck? I looked around and everyone was sighing with annoyance and impatience. The bagger, the cashier, the people behind me. Seriously? I placed my items down on a nearby drink refrigerator and asked the lady if she needed any help. With a brightness and joy in her eyes, she answered, "Please." I unloaded her buggy onto the conveyor and placed the bagged groceries back in as the bagger handed them to me. I was finished in no time, smiled at the lady, picked my items back up, and got back in line behind her. She paused for a moment. Evidently, she had been so flustered with trying to place her groceries on the conveyor, she had never noticed me behind her. "Wait, you don't work here?" "No, ma'am. Just thought you might appreciate a little help." She then gave me the biggest hug, and with tears in her eyes, she said, "Thank you. Thank you so much." I smiled again and told her, "You're welcome." I followed her out to her vehicle and helped her load everything. She thanked me again and told me she dreaded going to the grocery store because it was so difficult for her, and people were always getting frustrated with her when it came to checking out. I shook my head. That is sad. I'm sorry about that. Back home, stuff like that doesn't happen. If someone needs help, we help them. She started to tear up again, hugged me, and thanked me. I told her to have a nice day and headed back to my truck.
My heart feels so warm right now.
It won't after we read this next one. Entitled relatives think they deserve more than my adopted son. To give some context here, I must say that I'm an IT engineer with toxic family relationships. I did cut off my father and my uncles and aunts, yet I keep in contact with my cousins and their kids, which somehow I treat as mine, as I had none and I'm an only child. Therefore, it's the closest I got. I always prioritize success over relationships, so I'm single, and through the years I felt that my cousins' kids weren't mine, therefore I wanted to raise one of my own. It took me some time, but finally I adopted an 8-year-old, as those usually age out of foster care. I love the experience of raising a kid, yet I have had to deal with some entitledness from my cousins. It turns out that every now and then I usually spend some money traveling with my cousins and their kids. Yet this year, for obvious reasons, I need to save money in order to get all of the stuff my son would need, and I'm planning on going big, the best of the best I can afford. I just explained this to my cousins and told them this year our trip together will be canceled. They said nothing, so I thought they understood the whole situation. Anyway, I wanted my kid to socialize with my cousins' kids, so I invite them all to a get-together party. After about 2 months, when my son felt comfortable enough, and somehow all of the kids were so mad and refused to play with my kid. He just sat in a corner and tried to not cry, but he did. I just talked with the kids, and they said he was not part of the family and they deserve more, as he's adopted, and they, as my family, were entitled to the trip to the parks in Florida. I was in shock and asked them where they got that from, and they told me how their parents have told them the reason why I took their trip was my son, who comes from the streets and isn't even family. I was fuming, so I told them all to leave. I had a Zoom meeting with just my cousins, who told me that their kids must come first, and I told them they made me realize my son comes first, so I canceled their college funds, their private school tuitions, and just told them that if my kid is not part of their family, neither am I, and they were cut off. I've been called unreasonable, but I think my son comes first, and I made the right decision. You want things done by the book? All right, let's do that. I work as a freelance artist doing advertisement, ticket, and program booklet designs for various police and firefighter events that give to children's charities. It's not consistent work, but it pays pretty well for what it is. The people I work with directly are a promotions company that was created to sell the advertisement space and tickets. I've been working for them for a long time. Throughout lockdown, these people were essentially my only source of income, so I had to put up with their BS. Mostly having to put up with having to hear the check is in the mail for 2 or 3 months before it actually arrives. I convinced the owner of the company to download PayPal so I could be paid in a reasonable time. He was confused on how to use it, so I told him about Cash App. I was paid through Cash App only once before he said, "I just want to keep doing this by the book. These websites you're sending me look scammy." And because I don't work for him, I work for the unions and they're the ones cutting the checks. I asked him if he really wants to do that, and of course he said yes. Cue malicious compliance. He's becoming quite upset with me since he realized doing it by the book actually gives me all of the leverage. From that point forward, I had begun putting my logo watermark on every single thing I sent him. The first time he experienced this was with show tickets. He asked me to remove the watermark and send it to the printers. He was satisfied with the work. I told him the watermark will come off when there is money in my account. He told me that he can't start making sales until he has the tickets to sell. Thus, he doesn't have the money to pay me. Oh man, that sucks. Better figure out how to pay me electronically then. Here's my wallets, PayPal, and Cash App info, as well as info for direct deposit. He insisted he couldn't pay me before he has the tickets, so he agreed to a 50% price increase for me to release the files to him without pay, and with the company's logo on them. I actually got paid for that today. The second time was with a show poster. The same instance occurred, only this time I was told I'd have to talk to the Fraternal Order of Police about being paid since I work for them. They were very confused when I called them. An hour later, I got an angry phone call and was paid via direct deposit from the promoter's business account, not the FOP's account. This morning was pretty interesting. He called me up while meeting with the police association to talk about cutting me a check for the last show that happened yesterday. On this call, I was asked about bank transfers, asked how to make a wallet, all that good stuff. But the promoter asked why my invoice stated that I'm no longer accepting checks as a form of payment. "Are you sure you want me to answer that in this meeting?" I asked him. He said yes. So I told him while he was on speakerphone with his boss. "Because you don't pay me for months when we do checks. I only accept online or bank transfers." There was a little back and forth between him and the guy from the police association. It didn't sound like Mr. Promoter was having a good time. I was told I would get a call back about payment. Well, I received that call from the police association, not the promotion agency. I've been paid via PayPal and apologized to profusely. When I got the call from the promoter afterward, he had a very upset tone. He asked why I'm doing all this. "Well, sir, you told me you wanted it done by the book, right? This is by the book. We didn't do it by the book before because I've worked with you for years and your son is my best friend, so this is how it will be from now on. We'll see how it turns out. I'm confident I won't be losing any work since the police associations, firefighters, and other organizations have repeatedly told me how great my work looks and how I often work at half the price of other freelancers." How I got my boss fired when he tried to fire me. Starting out, let me explain why there wasn't a mass walkout and why I am the only one that quit despite us basically being terrorized at work. The job market was in shambles in my city at that time, with something like a 40% unemployment rate. I knew someone with a doctorate degree in theoretical physics working at a local fast food joint, as it was literally the only place hiring. The city had quick access to 4 research universities, but he got downsized due to lower admission rates. He is now the dean of the physics department at his former school. To quit any job, no matter how bad, was not smart and a guarantee that you would not find a new one. I always worked customer service, food service, and hospitality since I was 14. At 24, I decided it was time to find a job with benefits and potential for career advancement, so I took a job stocking shelves overnight with a global monstrosity that started out as a mom-and-pop store. I felt right at home. I worked hard and constantly took the worst jobs and the worst days off to make sure I would be there on the weakest staffing days to rub elbows with management. If there was anything that occasionally came up that no one on the shift was trained to do, I would come in on my day off, without pay, to get trained how to do the task, like keys, paint, accounting issues, etc., to become less disposable and more versatile. It worked, and 10 months in, I found myself with an offer to promote to low-level management starting January 1st. Starting the weekend before Thanksgiving, the overnight manager started to understaff shifts to preserve his end-of-year bonus and acted surprised when people called out. He would then bully us into staying over with threats of write-ups for not finishing our assigned stocking tasks. Upper management was notorious for just signing off on write-ups without looking into their validity, so each staff being assigned 13 plus hours of labor to complete alone in 6 hours, while typically it was approximately 4.5 hours to account for tending to customers as well, was no defense. Since an employee could only get 2 of those write-ups in a rolling 13-month period before termination, we all would stay over as well as skip our breaks and lunches to finish. Those write-ups were also less job-threatening as he would simply turn a blind eye to us clocking out for break/lunch and returning to work. But there was a catch. Since any approved overtime would count against his $73,000 bonus, approximately 11 cents per approved hour, he would never file the approval forms for the overtime. This meant that it was considered unapproved, meaning that we were required to get approval to cut hours off our regular shifts to equal out what we stayed for. He, of course, never approved us to cut these hours. This was resulting in weekly write-ups from the same manager for unapproved overtime on those of us that made it to work every day despite the weather and missed holiday get-togethers with our families. Every week we would get our write-up and he would get praise for getting everything done with less approved staffing hours than typically allocated. Thankfully, write-ups for unapproved overtime didn't carry a lot of weight, but for 3 months they counted against your points for promotion opportunities. This went on until a week before Christmas. When I got my weekly write-up, I was told by the store manager, who offered me my position, I would be suspended for overtime abuse the next time my manager submitted a write-up for unapproved overtime hours. Determined to not lose my promotion, I started telling the manager no. The second time I refused to stay over without him signing an overtime approval form and giving me a physical signed copy before I hit overtime, he wrote me up for abusive actions towards a member of management and actions with intent to undermine the integrity of management and store policies. This instantly cost me my promotion, which greatly upset me. And then, like the idiot he is, he left me alone in his office to sign the write-ups and the acknowledgement that I was no longer promoting. Initially, I was going to just accept it and resolve myself to spending the next 13 months working my tail off for minimum wage and go up for promotion as soon as they fell off. When I started reading the acknowledgement form, I found I was not eligible to promote to management until I was write-up free for 5 years. This meant 6 years and 1 month before I could even try to get promoted again, all because I followed policy. So rather than sign it, I wrote "Buzz Off" in Sharpie across his brand new desk, which he got for being such a great manager, walked out of his office, handed him my vest and name tag, shredded the write-ups, and tossed them into the air like confetti, and told his no longer smug face that it was now my personal mission to get him fired. He lost his attitude when it sunk in I just quit. I could see little beads of panic sweat forming on his forehead as he realized that the only person capable of performing certain highly essential functions for his shift was walking out the door. He shouted after me, telling me that he could talk to the general manager and see if he could get the time frame cut down to 3 years. He offered to approve all of my overtime the rest of the season, offered me a cut of his bonus, and several other offers I can't remember. Honestly, if he had offered to withdraw the write-ups, which was still 100% an option but he never offered, I would have accepted it, but I might not have followed through on my threat. I was too angry and too determined, and I didn't care if I became homeless as long as I never had to work there again. Now, how did I get him fired? Well, due to certain ADA requirements, I was permitted to carry a voice recorder with me at work so I could record important meetings, announcements, and reminders. When I got written up the first time for unapproved overtime, I started recording his requests to both me and coworkers. I never used them to dispute the write-ups, but I never deleted them either. So I uploaded all the recordings to my computer, nearly 18 hours of audio, and sent it to the home office, CCing every store manager and compliance officer in the district. When I went in for my last paycheck, he was long gone. I was offered my promotion back, but I declined. The regional director then offered me my old manager's job with a $73,000 hiring bonus. Wonder where that came from. But I still refused and said I was never returning to retail. My former manager's boss laughed and told me that everyone returns eventually, and when I did come see her, she would find me a management spot somewhere. After 5 months of being unemployed, living with my mom, and barely surviving, I moved to another state and got a job working in a state prison as a guard, and am very fulfilled. Have you ever had a boss you couldn't stand? If so, what did you do about it? Please let us know.
I've never had a boss because I've never had a job.
Karen left me a 5% tip, ends up regretting it. I've been a server for 2 to 3 years now. I'm usually pretty good at keeping my temper in line. I've had a rough summer between the off-season and health issues, so I virtually made no money from mid-June, mid-September, which doesn't help pay my bills. We all typically have a good feeling about certain tables and if they're going to tip or not. I started serving a 3-top, and I just had the vibes that they were comment tippers. They ordered multiple expensive drinks, ordered food, complained about, and I fixed and got them entirely new meals, and made jokes with them and followed exactly what they wanted. They had 2 friends join them towards the end of their meal, and I was really hoping another one would show up because I would be able to add an automatic gratuity if there were a party of 6. The night goes on, and they've been with me for a total of 3 hours. I went to my boss and asked him if we could add the auto gratuity because their bill was $350 and climbing. And I just had this horrible sinking feeling that they were going to stiff me. He said we couldn't, and even my other coworkers were like, "Hey, they're going to do her over." Time comes for the bill and they split it. One girl handed me a $20 bill and the others signed their slips. Our policy is to grab the checks while they're on the table after being signed to say a pleasant goodnight spiel. I do so and see how they all didn't leave me a single tip. I got a 5% tip for 3 hours of work and lost out on $100 between them not tipping and having to still tip out. I was absolutely fuming. So I went and took the $20 back and put it back on their table and said, "Have a good night," and walked back inside. A few minutes later, I get all 5 of them running in, yelling at me about how disrespectful and rude I am. I blankly looked at them and told them, "I'm sorry you perceived it that way, but I find it disrespectful and disgusting to tip a server 5% when they just busted their tail for you for 3 hours." They tried to yell at me and say, why didn't I come and ask for more tip then? Why be shady? I said that I shouldn't have to come and ask, why I wasn't given a proper tip, And when you yourself told me how amazing of a server I was for you, and that maybe next time, don't let your man order 6 $25 drinks. If you can't afford to tip, don't go out to eat. My manager was there for the whole thing and kinda let me say my piece at last. Their only complaint to him was me slamming the money down on the table. They even confirmed I was a good server and yet still left me nothing. But it felt so good to tell them off, because this is not okay to do to servers. Edit to add, if all you're going to say is, your boss owes you a living wage, seriously, stop. I'm legit doing the absolute best I can at a place that typically makes me good money. I can't fix the US system, so stop blaming my owner when he's legit trying to pay us more hourly currently. Well, this is Red Lobster, and we do things the Red Lobster way. This happened several years ago, and I am forever relieved I don't work in a restaurant anymore. Solidarity to all kitchen workers for the endless BS you have to deal with. At the time, I was working in the kitchen as an assembler. This can be one of the most clutch positions on the line, as you take all the food being prepared by the other cooks and organize it into tickets that can be taken out into the dining room. Accordingly, it is often a bottleneck for food leaving the kitchen. If you have a slow assembler, cooked food goes bad under the heating lamps. Grilled salmon dries out, fries become soggy, linguine Alfredo hardens into concrete. Really horrific stuff. It is imperative that food not sit in the window. I was working a weekday lunch shift, which is normally pretty slow. We must have provoked the wrath of restaurant gods on this day though, because out of nowhere, the store got hit with a tsunami of customers. I could just barely make out the other cooks through the clouds of shrimp scampi, fryer grease, and cheddar bay biscuits flying through the air. I knew the crap blizzard was headed my direction and began putting empty plates up in the window with the shape of each ticket that was to leave the kitchen, a technique I had learned to help survive times like this. On the other side of the window, coordinating the servers, was my manager, Jerkface. Shouldn't use his real name. Actually, let's call him Bob instead. Bob was a bit hyperactive and had an irritating tendency to micromanage kitchen processes, a problem compounded by his not knowing how to run a kitchen. When I began putting empty plates in the window so that the incoming interstellar-sized wave of seafood had something to land on, he stopped me.
"What are you doing?"
Bob asked. "I'm putting the plates and their sides in the window because we're about to have a very high volume of food coming through," I replied.
"Well, this is Red Lobster, and here we do things the Red Lobster way. We plate the food when the food is ready, and we don't put the sides on early."
I tried explaining that the Red Lobster way was designed by sentient suits and ties, physically incapable of holding a spatula, that our sacred way, as dictated in the good book of employee training, had gone out in the trenches of last year's endless shrimp special, that while I appreciated the job, I wasn't prepared to go out at the hands of this rush to uphold its most obscure tenets. But he wasn't having any of it. Bob insisted that I take the plates out of the window and only pass him plates and tickets that were 100% completed. Knowing full well that Bob was flying us by the book into a storm of crap, I put on a raincoat, rubbed some Vicks under my nose, and braced for the impact. 30 minutes later, the window was chaos. Finished food was left in the wings of the window, while I plated up one finished ticket at a time. Bob was equal parts confused and furious, like a toddler whose toy was suddenly taken away.
"What's this food waiting on?"
he cried, gesturing towards a shriveled up steak and its associated sides. "Well, that order is waiting on some fried shrimp, and I need to wait for the ticket to be complete before I plate it up."
"Why is the ticket missing fried shrimp?"
"Unfortunately, I'm not manning the fryer, sir, so I don't know." This continued for the better part of an hour. It seemed like every ticket was missing one little thing that kept it from leaving the kitchen. After the rush had passed, Bob approached me with the twitchy, nervous energy of a hyper-caffeinated, insecure manager who needed to assert his dominance over the underpaid crew of some bunk seafood restaurant.
"Can I, speak to you in the walk-in for a moment, username's Rue?"
"Sure thing." We walked to the cooler as I struggled to remember how to fight off an attacker.
"So, what happened back there?"
Bob asked, arms folded, shifting his weight from one foot to the other. "You said we should follow the system, and we did," I replied, mentally noting that he was standing in front of the walk-in's only exit.
"But there were a lot of missed items on those tickets. We had food dying in the window.
I saw it. Yeah, it was pretty bad.
So, why was the food missing?
I don't know. I wasn't cooking the food. I was assembling it. I'm the assembler. This line of questioning continued, with Bob trying to somehow pin this mess on me, while I insisted that I did exactly what was asked of me. After not being able to move past this point for several minutes, Bob made some sweeping statement about
Doing better next time.
and then left. Incidentally, the next time I was assembling and Bob was on the other side of the window, nothing was said about the Red Lobster way, and the rush went smoother, albeit with some hotter plates and servers having to return for delayed items. I guess we ended up doing better after all. My housemaid keeps throwing out my food. She says it's gross. I'm losing my mind here. I need perspective. 6 months ago, I moved in with a friend and her friend. My friend is chill. Her friend is nice, but is super clean freak. My friend warned me about that, so I've been on my game keeping everything extra clean, though we had some small differences of opinion. Example, I left 2 textbooks on the kitchen table overnight after studying, and the next morning she told me I shouldn't leave mess on the table. Okay, I didn't think a couple of books was a mess, but cool, no worries, won't do it again. The problem is the fridge. One of Jane's weekly, self-appointed chores is to clean out the fridge. I don't think a fridge needs to be cleaned weekly, but hey, her call. Thing is, she keeps throwing out my food. We have different ideas about how long food is still good. She's adamant leftovers shouldn't be eaten after 3 days. I eat leftovers for up to a week. I'm pretty generous to my vegetables with how long I still eat them. Like, if my carrots get a little soft or my kale's a bit wilted, they're not perfect, but they're still good for a stew. Let me stress, they are not going bad or gross or smelly or moldy or any of the terrible things you can imagine in a shared fridge. I've never left actual bad food in there. They're just not supermarket shiny. My food budget is tight. I'm not gonna waste food. We just had a blow up because I went to eat the stir fry I cooked Monday night. Gone. Jane's thrown out my leftovers before because she claims it's gone bad after a few days, or thrown out unpretty vegetables that I know were fine because I looked at them that very day, but she had claimed that they were gross. I've asked her before not to throw out my food just because she personally wouldn't eat it, because it's fine. I asked her about the stir fry. She said she threw it out because it's been there for weeks. Jane, it hasn't been there for weeks. I cooked it on Monday night.
It has. It's been there for weeks. It's disgusting. I got rid of it.
Jane, I literally cooked it on Monday. I know I did because I was there. Please stop throwing out my food. It's fine. You don't have to eat it, but you can't just toss my stuff. She went off about how it's disgusting, the food I keep in there, and it's going to make me sick. It doesn't. And how she's doing me a favor and I should be thanking her for cleaning the fridge weekly because it's disgusting that we wouldn't do it if she wasn't here. I can't even deal with this, so I just calmly said, Jane, the fridge isn't disgusting. Please leave my food alone, and walked upstairs because I just couldn't handle getting into a screaming match about it. She went to my friend, going off about how rude I was to walk out on a discussion and how my food is gross. I know I might be looser than the others on when food is still good, but I don't think I'm doing anything gross. My food is not gone rotten, smelly, or moldy. Am I being gross to have leftovers in the fridge for a week? Or vegetables that are a bit soft? ETA. Thanks, and lots of people have suggested a mini fridge in my room, which I get is one solution. I just don't think I should have to. Carting my food up and downstairs from the kitchen to cook a meal if my roommate is being unreasonable seems uncool and expensive for me to get one. We do have separate shelves in the fridge, so she knows my leftovers are mine. To be honest, I think she targets them because she assumes they're gross. They are sealed, but we all put a special portion of our vegetables in the bottom chiller drawer together, but she knows which ones are hers and which are mine. I guess I was just paranoid because I grew up in not the cleanest house, and we did really stretch our food and sometimes did have stuff so gross in the fridge as a kid, so even though I don't let food go gross now, I was worried I'm crossing some kind of unspoken boundary about acceptable food to keep in the fridge because my house and fridge were messy growing up. ETA 2. My God, people. I just wanted to make sure I wasn't being inadvertently gross with my old veggies and my 5 days leftovers. Not go nuclear. Y'all are savage. Remind me not to mess with your food. ETA 3. Okay, thank you all. Label your food seems to be the winner, and also the most sensible, easiest, and non-conflict inducing advice. Although I am finding my petty streak, so maybe all the labels will just say, "It's fine, Jane, leave it alone." Make parts non-stop, but never get them shipped? Okay, boss. I still have nightmares from working in this company, so I thought I would share one of my stories. Background. I worked at a factory that I absolutely loved. Loved the boss. My manager, now called Head AH, really knew his work and would teach anyone that showed enthusiasm. But then the company merged, and we suddenly had in my section 3 managers trying to prove their worth, who all turned into massive jerks. The place quickly turned into every man for himself. For example, the 10 minutes I spent patching up a coworker before he went to the hospital came at the cost of being screamed at, then forced to stay back to make up for my timesheets being out. Can tell more tales of this another time. And while my section needed 5 people to run, the way they managed it, people walked out, and it came down to me alone. I would have 3 different managers come to yell at me, but not help or hire people to do the work. Seriously, they would come in, scream, and run out. I was desperate to quit, but living paycheck to paycheck, things were really hard. My role was to run a CNC router, but had to run 2 of them as I'm now alone, complete the parts, and get it ready to send to the customer. Often, from start to ship, my parts are only handled by me. This is not normal. Normally, you would have someone to help complete the parts. As I am alone, I have to keep up with the machine. It makes sense to have the machine off at times during the day while I get things completed. You could expect a screaming if the place was messy at the end of the day. Ballistic screaming. Now for the story. Keep in mind this is 15 plus years ago, so it might not be 100% accurate. I had machined a stack of parts, and there was no way I could, in my right mind, make more parts until I had done the post-processing and had these parts ready to be shipped. There were things that had to be sent that day. Head manager.
Why aren't the machines running?
Me. I'm really behind on this and…
Why aren't the machines running?
Me. This is really urgent. Let me get this part sent and I can run the machines after I finish this. Now, absolutely screaming and throwing things.
Get the machines running, Anon.
He starts berating me and saying that the post-processing wasn't important and running the machines was the most important, and that I had to keep the machines running no matter what, and that post-processing can be done by anyone in the factory, but I'm the only one who can run the machines, so I have to run them and keep them running no matter what. Cue malicious compliance. For the entire week, I did exactly what he asked. I ran both machines. I would load the programs for the next job while the machine was still running its existing job. Tool holders were lined up and ready to go. While the machines are running, I would sprint from the machines to the material racks to get materials I needed for the next job ready. I ran those machines non-stop. I did 0 post-processing as I did not have a spare minute. Nothing was finished to stage where it could be shipped. There wasn't even time for breaks. I made sure those machines ran without a minute of downtime. By the end of the week, I had machined so many parts that I had filled up 3 massive workbenches. These benches were something like 3 meters by 1.5 meters long, and I just kept stacking the piles as high as I could. The best thing is that the urgent work is now on the bottom of this pile, and the work due next week was on top. This is literally hundreds of different customers' orders. I don't remember the hours I pulled at this exact time, but I have done shifts such as 6 a.m. to 10 p.m. and 7 a.m. to 11 p.m. 80-hour weeks without overtime pay were usual for me. When crap finally hit the fan about a week of not being sent out, Head Jerk comes to talk to me, and you could see something snap in his head while he was trying to talk.
Hey, Anon.
Me. Sorry, not now. I have to run the machine. I just ignored him, and I kept setting up the next job.
Stop. Just stop.
He starts by trying to ask me where this job is, and I'm just gesturing. It's under there, man. The look on his face was priceless. He starts berating me on how there is no point turning the machines on at all unless the work is completed all the way and sent. He really got stuck into me, but then he's like,
just leave the machine off for now and start completing these jobs.
But then we both start on completely different parts, and within a minute he sees me and instantly,
get the machines running, Anon.
And I think it's here where he realized that it's all his fault. And as I'm walking back to the machine, I swear he looks up at his roof,
screams, "No!"
and it's as if his soul has left his body. And I'm laughing hard remembering this. He yells at me,
"Leave it off."
and as I start finishing parts again, he looks at me and he's about to say the line again, but instead looks up at the roof and screams again. It was like every time he saw me, he wanted to say it. He lasted maybe 10 minutes before he couldn't take it anymore. He storms off and sends someone over to help. But all the urgent work was buried deep. We had to complete non-urgent work first to get it out of the way so that we could find it. And guess who suddenly left work on time every day and stopped working weekends? In short, with people helping me, it took over 2 weeks to catch up and clear the backlog. Those urgent parts were at least 2 weeks late. It took a lot longer for the schedule to return to normal. Let you handle it? Okay, I'll just be over here. Background. I am the video conference / audio visual specialist for a state agency. This means that I assist with any meetings that use MS Teams, WebEx, Zoom, and anything in between, along with troubleshooting any issues with video conference equipment, TVs, Crestron racks, etc. However, if any equipment needs repair or replacement, we have a contract with a third party to come out and investigate. I am also a mid-30s man, though I could probably pass for 20s, hence the kid remark later. And while I'm not going to win any strongman competitions, I'm 5'11", pretty stocky, and work out regularly. Incident. This happened last week. There's a TV mounted in the director's conference room that has been acting up for the past few weeks. Every time I think I fixed it, it'll bug out again. Either the TV won't power on, or it will power on, but only show a black screen. TV won't respond to any inputs, etc. It may work for a day without issue, and then the next, everything I try won't get it working. Basically, the TV is foobar. I call up the contractor and explain the situation, and he then proceeds to talk down to me like I don't know how to do my job, which already rubbed me the wrong way. Contractor.
"Have you tried this?"
Me. Yes. Contractor.
"This?"
Me. Yes.
"This?"
Yes.
Okay. Well, good news. TV should still be under warranty with us anyway, so we can probably come out and replace the TV.
Me. Okay, great. Well, give me a time so I can be available to help y'all out.
We can handle it. We'll be out sometime tomorrow.
Okay, great. Click. Now, what I had neglected to tell them was that this TV is an 84-inch Panasonic LCD display. It is a beast and very heavy, 238 pounds. Next day comes and in walks a 5'5" man in at least his early 60s with very little muscle on him and a tall lanky dude that I'm not saying was an addict, but I am saying he was missing a lot of teeth, face was pretty scarred, and didn't look particularly fit. No way these guys are getting this TV off its mount. Shorty does the talking here. Shorty.
You call about the TV?
Me. Yeah. Look, this TV is pretty heavy, so you just let me know where you need me to help you get it down.
No need. We got this.
Me. Trust me, guys. This TV is a monster. Shorty then claps me on the shoulder.
Look, kid. I've been doing this a lot longer than you, okay? Just leave it to the professionals.
Cue malicious compliance. Me. Okay, right this way. I lead them to the director's conference room, and they are all smiles until they see this TV, and their faces drop. They just sort of stand there in the doorway in a brief stunned silence. Me. Well, I'll be at my desk if you need anything. I walk off, and the way my desk is positioned, if I lean just enough, I can see into the conference room. I watch for a while as these two pace around the TV a bit, scratching their heads trying to figure out how to get this TV down. Finally, I see them try and give it the old heave-ho with Shorty standing on his tiptoes trying to lift this TV off its mount. His face turns beet red and his arms are shaking pretty hard. They give a few more tries until finally deciding they can't get it. I see Shorty heading my way as I lean forward back to my desk. Shorty.
Hey man, would you mind giving us a hand?
Me. Actually, some important emails just came in. I point to a screen he can't see that has Reddit pulled up. Shorty.
It'll only take a minute.
Me. I don't know. I'd really like to leave it to the professionals. Shorty.
Please?
Me. You know what? Sure. These emails can wait. I close Reddit. We walk back to the conference room. I take one side, they both take the other, and all three of us heave this TV off and onto a dolly. They take it off and bring in a much lighter flat screen as a temporary replacement. They set it up and pack up to leave. Me, thanks guys. I clap Shorty on the shoulder. And hey, I'm here if you need anything next time. Shorty,
Yeah, thanks.
grumble out the door. New TV works great, by the way. Flip-flop Karen. Yesterday, Sunday, I went to visit my son, daughter-in-law, and grandson to deliver some food my wife made. Lasagna, baby. When my wife makes lasagna, everybody gets some. Daughter-in-law is in bed as she had hurt her back on Friday and it was still giving her issues. Been there, done that. It sucks. I'm playing with my grandson and my son mentions he's gonna take him to the grocery store to pick up a few things so daughter-in-law doesn't have to worry about going. Grandson is cutting molars and not in a very good mood. I offer to go with him to the store to expedite the process as it's on my way home. We take separate cars and meet up, start shopping, and are knocking it out, me grabbing things and my son entertaining little Mr. Cranky Pants. We stopped in the pet food and supplies aisle as he needed kitty litter. I grab it and leave, heading over to the dairy aisle. One more thing to get and we are out of there. This pet food aisle is set up as dog foods and supplies on one side, a cooler with fresh pet food, bird food, hamster food, etc., then cat food and supplies on the opposite end. While leaving the aisle, I did hear someone yelling, "Hey!" but paid it no mind. While walking to the dairy aisle, I heard a faint slap, 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 slap. That is the unmistakable sound of flip-flops. We live in Florida, and flip-flops are a way of life. Heck, when it gets cold, there are some who wear them with socks. Walking in the dairy aisle, still hearing the slap, 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 slap. Grab the butter, and as we are turning the corner to head to the registers, slap, 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 slap.
Hey, stop running from me. I've been chasing you for 10 minutes. I need help. Where is...
Insert some random dog food. She was visibly out of breath. We both turn around, and right away she starts in about chasing us down, blah blah blah. But you could tell she was confused, as we are not dressed anywhere close to what employees wear, as they wear green uniforms. She kept staring at our shirts, me with a Steppenwolf t-shirt, complete with a large wolf head, and my son with a Donkey Kong t-shirt. Not ready to admit defeat yet, she tried to say something else, and at this moment, my grandson sticks his arms straight out and starts waving his hands around, saying, "No!" Yup, we both lost it and started laughing so hard we were in tears. Just said, "Don't work here," turned around and continued to the registers without incident. She stood there, mouth gaping. She ran down to the other end of the pet aisle, past 3 other aisles, then ran down the entire length of the dairy aisle in her flip-flops to chase down 2 men and a baby to ask about some random dog food. Slap, 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 slap. No, I can't leave the gas station I'm working at during the middle of my shift to order McDonald's for you. This was quite a while ago, over a year at least. I don't remember exactly how long, but I still think about it from time to time, wondering what planet this lady must have come from to think a request such as hers was even remotely reasonable. I work at a gas station in a small town. Although the town is very small, a major highway cuts through it, and the gas station where I work is often fairly busy. We're actually busy enough to justify having 2 workers, but the owners disagree and figure the gas station itself is small enough that 1 worker should be able to handle things fine on their own. Yes, I have some stories that prove the owners have clearly never had to work under the conditions they expect us to, but those are for another day. My point is that the cashier on duty for that shift is the only person working there at that time, unless they're training someone, and trainees are given exactly 2 days of training before getting thrown in the deep end because, God forbid, the owners have to pay 2 people to work at the same time. Never mind, it gets busy enough to have lines snake around the whole building quite often. I should also mention our number is similar to a few other places, including some that are actually in the next town over. So when we answer the phone, we answer with, "Hello, you've reached name of town, name of gas station." The idea being, upon hearing this, any missed dials will realize immediately they have the wrong number and prevent conversations like the following. Obviously, it didn't work in this case. It's a typical day at work, and I had just finished helping a customer. It was a rare, blissfully slow day, so far. So there was only 1 other customer in the store at the time who was busy browsing the drink section we had when the store phone rang. Normally, our policy is customers in store get priority over phone calls, but as the only customer in the store wasn't actually ready to check out yet, I went ahead and answered it. This is the conversation that ensued. Me. Hello, you've reached our gas station. How may I help you? Karen.
Yeah, I want to call ahead my order so y'all have it ready when I get there. I want a McDouble and a large fry with...
Me. Cuts the lady off. Ma'am, I'm sorry, but this is a gas station, not McDonald's.
This isn't McDonald's?
No, ma'am. It's the gas station. Karen.
Are you sure?
Me. Glances at the gas pumps outside, thinking, what the heck? Yes, ma'am, I'm sure.
Well, I called because I want my order ready when I get there.
Me. Well, then you'll need to call McDonald's. Karen.
Can't you just run over there and hand your phone to them? Or just order for me and I can talk you through it?
At this point, I should mention the store phone is obviously a landline phone. I mean, yeah, it's cordless, but it has a limited range on how far you can take it from the base before it stops working. So not only is this request ridiculous, but it's also literally impossible. Me. I'm sorry, ma'am, but I can't do that. Karen.
What do you mean you can't do that? Why not? This is terrible customer service.
Unintelligible yelling and ranting. So yeah, she literally started yelling at me because of her mistake and the fact she was apparently too lazy, entitled, to hang up and dial the correct number, instead expecting me to leave my actual job in the middle of my shift, leaving the store unsupervised to help her pre-order her McDonald's so she wouldn't have to wait. Who, from her attitude with me, I can only guess she would have immediately complained that it was cold. By now, the in-store customer is ready at the counter, and as the person on the phone is actually not even wanting us, it was time to cut this off, and while admittedly probably wasn't the right way to handle things, I needed her off the phone so I could help my actual customer. I completely dropped my polite retail persona and decided to be absolutely blunt. Look, lady, I cannot leave my workplace while I'm working. I have my own customers to help. The phone we're speaking on is a landline, as are most businesses' phones, and even if I wanted to help you, it doesn't have the range to go that far. As for customer service, you are not my customer. You are McDonald's customer, and it's actually not my job to help you order your McDonald's. Have a great day. The last part said in an overly sweet, sarcastic tone that I generally reserve for Karens. I hung up without even giving her a chance to respond, then helped my actual customer. She never called back, and I never got in any trouble. So she either didn't complain or complained to the wrong place, and I honestly have no idea if she ever did get her McDonald's. Speaking of McDonald's, what's your favorite thing from McDonald's? Please let us know.
Travis Scott meal for the win, bruh. Straight up.
My aunt refused to pay me after I babysat for her, so I posted our text conversation on Facebook. I, 17 male, watched my step-cousins, who are 7 and 9, last night for 5 hours, while my aunt, Melissa, who's 39, went out with her girlfriends. She offered to pay me $12 an hour, and I agreed because why not? Dinner's free, and me and her boys get along well. When my aunt arrived at 11 p.m., she got angry because the 9-year-old is still playing PlayStation with me, and the 7-year-old is watching a video on my phone. She said they're supposed to be in bed already, and she's very disappointed in me. I apologized and told her the boys begged me to stay up, and she didn't tell me what their bedtime was. After she sent the boys to bed, she told me she won't be paying as I ate dinner and snacks and also played GTA. I didn't argue with her, so I went home empty-handed. This morning, I texted her and asked if she still isn't paying me, and she responded with a no and a litany of reasons. I told her we agreed to $12 an hour, and it's unfair that she's stiffing me of my money. She said we are family, and I was practically just hanging out with her stepkids, so I don't deserve any payment. I got so upset, I took a screenshot of our text conversation and shared it to our family group chat. All my cousins, aunts, and uncles, Nana and Papa will be able to see it. Some of them did, including my mom, who called Melissa out for what she did to me. My aunt also called me and called me a jerk for being petty and shaming her in our group chat. So, am I the jerk? Did I go too far? Melissa's husband, who was away at the time, offered to pay me $100 and to post an apology to my aunt. I want to take the money, but I think apologizing to her is unfair. Who do you agree with, OP or his aunt? Please let us know.
If you wouldn't want your friends and family to know how you're treating someone, you probably shouldn't be treating them that way.
I was fired for exposing my boss, so I used his obsession with golf and watches to get him fired. This was in the last throes of the analog mid-90s. Fax machines, FedEx, dial-up computing, and voicemail were the most common business tools. I was a young regional sales manager for a major branded consumer product. I covered the grocery class of trade in 11 western states. My division worked out of Chicago, and I had a home office on the West Coast. I had made my reputation by typically making my quota and keeping costs within budget. I would get reassigned to struggling markets, and more often than not, I would usually make my sales number. Nothing too fancy. I just figured where the best opportunities were and concentrated on them. In those days, we had something called Market Development Funds, MDF, or as we called it, Making Days Fun, and the time before such things were deemed illegal. It was money we could literally use for almost anything you could imagine. Wining and dining, sending buyers to the Super Bowl, taking them on market research trips. I once took 6 honchos for a weekend of fishing in Mexico. As long as you had the receipts and your boss knew, except in cases where they specifically asked not to know, we were free to spend money as we saw fit. This was old school Mad Men style slush funds, all tax deductible. Typically, the MDF money was 2% of your total annual gross sales and was use it or lose it, meaning it had to be spent because it wouldn't roll over. I always had some left over. As a team player, I would let my boss, Sasquatch, know so he could use it. No big deal. Towards the end of the year, my weekly FedEx pack from the company started including sign-offs to payments for a supplier I had never even heard of before. What was weird is that they were a demo company that wasn't one of my regional suppliers. If you've ever been offered a sample or a coupon in a grocery store, that was a demo company. I called the broker/agent in that market and learned that they had never used the company or even heard of them. I finally figured out that they were from Sasquatch and that he had thrown them in with my other sign-offs. I called him and asked if he knew what they were. He said that they should be assigned to my MDF and not to worry about them. This was a little unusual because demos would normally be taken out of other monies or come down from marketing. Whatever, I signed off on them. Hung out to dry. About 3 months later, I was called into HQ for a meeting where I was told I was being transferred to a market that I had never worked before and would be required to relocate. At the time, my wife was pregnant, and we just started an extensive remodel on our newly purchased house. The company had some relocation benefits, but it was just too hectic to pull up roots and move to the southeast. I declined the offer and was told that I could look for another job within the company or receive a severance package. I wound up taking the severance. The truth comes to light. Several months later, one of my ex-coworkers told me that my region had been taken over by one of Sasquatch's past work associates who he managed to get hired in my spot, and that the region was tanking. Badly. Nothing made sense. Why was I terminated and then replaced by someone who lived in another city and who couldn't do the job? I started to think, in my naivete, that I may have put a target on my back. After some research and digging, which was much harder before the internet, I learned that the demo company, billing the MDF, was based in my ex-boss's previous city and was just a P.O. box, a telephone, and a DBA registered by the new person in my job. Later, I found out it was his girlfriend/mistress. I was livid. Like most people, I tend to plan revenge in my head, but never really go through with it. Most of the time, it's a coping mechanism and not very useful in moving on past being wronged. But this was so egregious, so uncalled for, and so disruptive to my life that I felt I had to get even. My plan evolved to take this guy down. Whatever the time it took, whatever the cost in lives or money, I was going to get this guy. I may have been able to rat him out to the company, but they might have dismissed my complaint as coming from a disgruntled employee with an axe to grind. The hook. I decided that I was going to approach Guy as a phony recruiter, not just a guy collecting resumes, but as a retained corporate headhunter, someone paid to onboard people for big jobs. I had spent a year early in my career working for a super exclusive headhunting firm and knew exactly what transpired in the process. My subterfuge required international telexes, phony letterhead, faked English accents, and overseas friends to do my bidding. Sasquatch was obsessed with expensive watches and golf. He played regularly and watched pro golf both on TV and live. He would incessantly chatter about both topics. To bait him, I arranged for him to be approached by an executive position with a major Swiss watch company for a position tied to pro golf and other swanky sports, sponsorships, and included a shopping list of benefits and perquisites. The job would require working with major sports organizers, flying around the world, first class, and basically spending money. It was a job he could only dream of. The setup. In the slow and methodical long con, I strung him along until the time was right to close with an offer. The only catch was that he had to report to Switzerland for final offer and onboarding. I deliberately scheduled it for the week of the old jobs division meetings and reporting. They were mandatory and impossible to miss without raising red flags. Sasquatch was worried that his absence would be impossible to cover, especially if he was out of the country. The headhunting firm said they could move the appointment up a few days so that he would be able to attend his meeting, but that he would need to purchase an unrestricted business class seat and make his own hotel reservations. Save your receipts, and the watch company will reimburse you, he was told. Sasquatch showed up to his swanky hotel suite using his own credit card for their expensive room and promptly received a note from the watch company that his appointment had to be rescheduled for the following Monday because of a major corporate crisis. Sasquatch called the phony recruiter in a panic about missing the corporate meetings back in the States. It was agreed that he would call in sick and that whatever happened with the old job, he was heading to much greener fairways. Enjoy your weekend in Europe. By Monday, you'll be in your dream job. The sting. While Sasquatch was cooling his jets in Europe, I nonchalantly called his boss, the president of the division, and casually asked for a reference on Sasquatch's work ethic and the dates of employment. You'd be surprised how often this mistake happens. The president, to his credit, didn't tip his hand or act very surprised by the call, but like a good corporate wonk, he referred me to human resources. I let it slip that he was in Europe, finalizing his new job, and that he had already given the company notice. My bad. The aftermath, and how the revenge overstepped its original mission. Eventually, I was able to put together the aftermath from my old co-workers and other people in the trade who did not know I was the revenge ninja. When Monday came and went, Sasquatch must have been apoplectic. This is to be assumed since we had cut all communications to let him twist in the wind, because we received at least 20 calls to the exchange and multiple faxes. Sasquatch hung around the hotel for a day or two and then finally decided to leave for home. I assume at some point he may have contacted the watch company, but I never confirmed it. When he finally got home, he found his office had been packed up and left with his wife. An HR person met him off-site to give him his severance and retrieve the car and other company property. I heard his wife left him sometime later and his mistress was fired for theft. I figure he spent at least $10,000 on travel and hotel. Epilogue. I wish I could say I tipped my hand and told Sasquatch that I was the author of his demise, but it really served no purpose and in theory may have exposed me to some retribution of my own. By my moral lodestar, I got even with a thief who was content to steal and take my livelihood. That was plenty. Show 'em how smart the accounting staff is at trivia games? Okay, boss. At the turn of the century, I worked as an accountant for a major sports team. The owner hired a new VP of Human Resources who immediately fired the chief financial officer. The CFO's duties were shifted down to the accounting staff, and we were a small staff of 6. We were swamped. At the same time, the new VP of HR organized an all-staff trivia contest between departments. When those of us in accounting saw the email, we immediately deleted it. We were already working evenings and weekends just to keep up. We had no spare time to spend an afternoon playing games. When the VP of HR saw that no one from accounting had signed up, he called another accountant and me into his office. He insisted we form a team and participate in the event. We explained how incredibly busy we were, pointed out the deadlines we were facing, and told him how many hours everyone in the department was working. His face turned red. He stood and pointed a finger at me and said, "This is not a request. This is mandatory. You will attend the trivia contest, and you will show the entire staff how smart the accounting staff is." He glared at both of us in turn. "Do you understand?" We nodded and left his office. Halfway back to the accounting office, my coworker gestured to the restroom, and we ducked inside. "If we've got to do this," she said with an evil grin, let's really do this. I nodded, catching her meaning. She was a highly educated, brilliant person who was well-versed in politics and current issues. I'll call her Ivy League. My talent is a bizarre memory for odd and normally unuseful factoids. The trivia teams had to be 3-player, and we decided to recruit another coworker who knew sports statistics to the point of being overzealous. Let's call him Sportster, and he was the perfect fit because we knew they'd have a lot of sports trivia in the game. We pulled him aside and went over our plan with him. We would show him how smart the accounting staff was, and we would do it as fast as possible so we could get back to the piles of work waiting for us. He was all in. On the day of the trivia game, all staff met in a bar in the empty arena. Ironically, the VP of HR was called away on an HR emergency, so he didn't show up at all. There was an open bar, appetizers, and a few of the sports team's players and broadcasters attended. The other trivia teams represented ticketing, guest services, operations, security, marketing, broadcasting, IT, the foundation, etc. I would estimate nearly 200 people were there. They were all drinking and filling up on the bar food. The 3 of us from accounting drank caffeinated soda and stayed sharp, and we dominated. The game was structured so 2 teams would play each other while the rest of the staff watched. When a team lost during a round, they were immediately out of the competition. It started as a fun event with laughter and teasing between departments. During the first round, our team easily and fiercely trounced the competition. The 3 of us stayed deadly serious and focused throughout the game. Ivy League was superb at answering the classical knowledge and politics questions. Sportster covered the world of athletics, and I was able to pull up anything they couldn't. As our team quickly routed our opponents and moved up into tiers, the laughter died away, and the fun atmosphere disappeared from the bar. We won the competition. We were awarded a small plastic trophy, and we left immediately, going back to the piles of work awaiting us at our cubicles. That evening, I worked quite late, quietly plugging away. Our middle manager accountant was in his office working and probably didn't realize I was still there. Someone stormed into the area and went right to the middle manager's office. "What the heck happened at the trivia thing?" It was the VP of HR. The middle manager talked about how Ivy League, MN Golden Girl, and Sportster were so intent on winning, it made everyone uncomfortable. I realized I had to make my presence known, so I grabbed my trophy and stood, prairie dogging over the cubicles. "Hey, you forgot to tell them," I said. "They tried to distract us by bringing in the players and the on-air talent." I laughed and set my trophy on the corner of the cubicle. "But we showed them how smart the accounting staff is." I didn't wait to see their reaction. I just sat and got back to work. In the 10 years I worked for that organization, there were no more all-staff trivia games played. How dare I have better grades than my sister? This happened, I think, when I was 12. I always did fairly well in school, but my sister, not so much. I knew she could do better, but she really didn't try all that hard. Then she'd be unhappy when she'd get low grades on a test. She didn't fail much, but got a lot of D's. One of the few things my parents and I ever actually agreed on together was trying to give my sister pep talks to try harder in school. My mom had a very "my princess can do no wrong" personality, but she still seemed to want my sister to succeed in school. So she forced me to help sister with her homework when I wasn't busy. I didn't mind helping with the homework, but sister didn't make helping her easy. She'd get mad if I didn't just do the homework for her. And yes, my mother did outright try a few times to make me do my sister's homework for her, but my dad shut that down fast. So my sister would get bored easily and go play video games when I didn't just give her the answers. So I stopped trying to help since she wouldn't listen. Not long after this, my sister failed several assignments in a row, and my parents forced her to do her homework before gaming, which really made her upset, but she complied. Not long after this, I got my annual report card and all my grades were pretty decent. When I presented the report card to my mother, my sister suddenly got upset and left the room. I asked Mom what that was about, and she scolded me saying, "How dare you rub your success in your sister's face?" I was a bit flabbergasted because this had never been an issue before and said I wasn't doing that at all. My mother then waved her finger in front of my eyes and said it was my fault sister was so unhappy because she's trying to do better in school, and I was bringing her down by being too happy about my report card around her. I grew some backbone and said that all I did was do good in school. I wasn't flaunting anything. Plus, how is it a crime to be too happy? Well, I guess that was the wrong answer to her because she immediately sent me to my room and said I wasn't getting any dinner. Dad was late getting home that night, so I went hungry till he got back. When I told him what had happened, he called my mother out. She started lying through her teeth and said I was bragging about my grades and flaunting them at my sister by waving the report card in her face, and my sister backed up my mom on this lie. My parents ended up fighting because my dad didn't believe what my mother was saying. Like my sister, she was a terrible liar in her own way. Whenever she lied, she'd always get overdramatic about every little detail and often couldn't keep the story straight without holes being poked in it. So Dad knew I was the one telling the truth. Mom was upset that Dad didn't believe her, and then he scolded her like a kid for sending me to my room without dinner over something that wasn't even my fault. He then told her to apologize to me. She rolled her eyes and gave me a really fake-sounding, "I'm sorry," and then stormed outside to cool off on the patio. My dad then made me a late dinner to make up for what my mom did. He also grounded my sister from video games for a few days for lying to him, and that made her scream and follow Mom outside. I got to have a good dinner of grilled cheese sandwiches and Campbell's tomato soup that night, something I still enjoy making and eating to this day. About a year or so after this, my sister copied a book report I did in elementary school, and my mother let her get away with it. But that's another story for another post. The provided lunch is for those who work through lunch only. You got it. The company I work for, and specifically the team I used to belong to, was one team of a department of like 60 operations people, and twice a month we had peak days, which were just high volume and crazy. To help on these days, one day the management team decides to start buying the department lunch on these days so we can work through our lunch and not have to worry about food. Now, please keep in the back of your mind that this is enough food for the 60 staffers and the 20 or so managers and supervisors. Now, this goes on for about 3 months, and we work through our lunch and always finish the work and put in our overtime. No issues. But now it's my manager's turn to set up the food order. But she can't just do that. No, she needs to project her skills, so she makes an announcement to the whole department.
It's been brought to my attention that some of you have been taking food and not skipping your lunches. The provided food is for those who work through lunch only.
Now, if she had ended it there, that would have been one thing, but she didn't. She adds,
And for the record, overtime will not be approved if you take the food. We are providing you lunch in exchange for your time.
barring how illegal this is, we are all upset and start checking our pay stubs. And sure enough, we were not paid for overtime on the last few peak days. Lunch shows up about an hour late, and not a single person outside of the managers got up and took the food. Not only that, none of us put any overtime that day. At the end of the day, the management team tossed all the food. 3 weeks later, on the next peak day, the same thing happens again, and then again on the peak day after that. The next time, the MD, managing director, comes on the floor in the morning and announces that there will be a change in our policy.
Team, we are tired of ordering food and throwing it away. We are also not keeping up with the volume of work on peak days. Food is anyone who wants to work through their lunch, and of course, you will be paid for your overtime. In fact, we will be retroactively paying for your unapproved overtime on your next paycheck. But we need to get the work done, so let's come together on this.
Turns out, one of the older ladies who had been with the company for like 40 years put in a call about what was said and happening to HR. And a lawyer. She wanted her overtime paid. It got so ugly that HR ended up pulling badge swipes to see what time everyone left for a 90-day period and paid us for any missed overtime to the minute past our scheduled time. For some people, it ended up being several $100s. Am I the jerk for not wanting to give my brother my inheritance? I want to start by saying this. I am not my parents' favorite kid. As much as this might sound absurd or even biased, which might be, there's no other way to describe my family. I'm the youngest sibling, third kid, and I have a sister, oldest, and a brother. My sister and brother are just a bit older than me, at 23 and 21, while I just turned 18 last August. Throughout my life, I've always known my parents didn't particularly like me. They would treat my siblings a lot better, give them better clothes and gifts, and even gave them allowances. I was never treated badly, but I was never given anything like that.
To be honest, I don't even remember the last time my parents gave me a gift for my birthday or even congratulated me for that matter. This was the reason I started working as a part-timer since I turned 13, washing cars, cutting grass, washing driveways, etc. That's how I managed to have some money should I need or buy things I want. For example, while my parents gave my siblings laptops once they got to high school, I needed to buy my own. Which is fine, they don't need to give me anything, I'm not entitled to it. It just made me very self-conscious about myself. Now to the main part. My grandfather was a very kind man, and when he passed, he left in his will, I'm not really sure about how this works, as I know almost nothing about the law, inheritances for his grandchildren, my siblings and myself, to finance our studies, college, housing, etc. As I understand, this money would only be possible to be used after the person is 18. Now, my sister went to college and is almost graduating. My brother, however, has changed his course 4 times in the last 2 years, and every time he did that, there was a large cost associated with it, especially since he aimed for expensive colleges. Now, he has spent a large part of his inheritance and probably won't be able to finance any course to the end. This is my main problem. My parents came to me and asked me to give my brother my part of the inheritance, as he has had that problem. Thing is, I'll be taking the college entrance exams in November/December, and by giving him this inheritance, I won't be able to do that, as I won't be able to afford college at all. I told them it was absurd, and it wasn't my fault that he wasted his part of the inheritance. Their answer was, "He's your brother and he needs help. He'll help you pay for your studies once he graduates."
That means I would need to postpone college for at least 4 or 5 years. I obviously don't want to do that, and told my parents that it was my decision. As you would assume, they didn't take that lightly. They've taken to call me an ungrateful kid and a jerk for not thinking about family. I'm constantly being shunned in my house, to the point that it's making me feel like a horrible person. Reddit, please, am I such a monster? Am I the jerk for refusing to give up the master bedroom and en-suite for my parents? I have 6 brothers. I'm the only girl. When my parents split, I was 10. My mother moved out in with her now husband, who himself has kids, so we only got every other weekend with him. My father decided, as I was the only girl in the family at that time, that I would be given the master bedroom and en-suite, which used to be his and my mother's room. He then moved into my room, which is the smallest bedroom in the home. I'm 20 now. I've got around 3 years left of college, and then I would like to move out for university. 3 of my brothers still live at home, who are 13, 16, and 18. My father's partner recently moved in with her 2 kids, who are 4 and 8, and to say the house is packed would be an understatement, especially since they openly want another kid. Don't ask me why. Well, my father's partner is complaining about having the smallest room. They could ask one of the younger ones to move into it, but they say since I'm an adult, I should move into the smaller room and plan to move out. I pay for the room and have a whole study section set up because this course is extremely fast-paced and a lot of work, especially since I go to work after, so I'm out from 6 in the morning till 11 that night for college and work. I've said no, I pay, so I'm allowed this room, but my father says he only gave it to me because I was the only girl, and now I'm not the only girl. His partner doesn't want to share the bathroom with 5 kids, etc. They're both pretty upset with me, and my friends say they have a point, that I am not entitled to the room and should be paying rent no matter the room. Am I the jerk? Am I the jerk for wanting my female friend at our wedding? I, 40 male, recently proposed to my girlfriend. Let's call her Hannah, 28 female, and our wedding is next July. As we are organizing the bridal party, the issue came up that Hannah doesn't have any close girlfriends. Her best friends are all guys, and while I've accepted it and I'm not jealous, I was at first, I admit, but I got over it. She said she just wants a best man, not a maid of honor, and no bridesmaids, which is very weird in my opinion. My family is traditional. I know they won't like it if she has no bridesmaids there and a guy instead. My dad already thinks Hannah's relationship with her male best friend is inappropriate, and she shouldn't be that close with another guy when she's in a long-term relationship. To be honest, I don't like her best friend either. I feel like he doesn't like me and wants to turn Hannah against me, but I hold my tongue because I know she'd get mad if I told her. I said she should choose some girls as bridesmaids instead, but Hannah refused, saying she's not close enough to any girls. I suggested she could ask her 2 sisters, which upset her,
because she has been no contact with her family for about 10 years. I pointed out this could be a good chance for her and her sisters to reconnect. Honestly, I think no matter what issues, you have family that should be at your wedding. She kept stubbornly refusing. Hannah kept saying that she didn't care about having bridesmaids or a maid of honor. She just wants her best friend there. She said he is like her family, and he was there for her when she went no contact with her real family. She really wants him at her wedding. I kept trying to explain why it made me uncomfortable, but she just wouldn't listen. She said it was unfair and claims there's no way Jack is romantically interested in her. He says that he's gay. In the end, I said fine. She could have a guy in her side of the party, but only if I could have a girl in my side. Well, Hannah said that was fine and that she didn't mind, but that quickly changed when I said who I wanted to invite. My ex-girlfriend. Let's call her Sasha, who's 34. Hannah said that it was one thing to want a friend at the wedding and another to invite an ex. But Sasha and I were together for 7 years, and now we are still on good terms, so I would say she's a friend. And since we were together for so long, I think she is just as much family to me as Hannah's friend is to her. I said that it was hypocritical for Hannah to get jealous of me wanting a female friend there when she wants her male friend to be there. She said that it's different, but I think it's the same thing, if not worse on her end. Sasha doesn't have an issue with Hannah, but I think her friend doesn't seem to like me, even if he's never said outright. She brought up how my parents, mainly my dad, keep saying they want me to get back with Sasha, which isn't even my fault. I said either Jack goes and she asks her sisters to be bridesmaids, or I get to have Sasha in the wedding party. Hannah isn't talking to me now. Am I the jerk? Am I the jerk for asking my roommate to stop having her sister over so often? I, 19 female, rent a 4-bedroom house with 3 other girls. Alex, who's 26 female, Taylor, 23 female, and Lauren, 18 female. Alex has a little sister, Anna, who's 9. Anna's mom drops her off to stay with Alex at least 2 nights a week. Alex's room is in the basement, and she basically has a separate apartment, so we don't see her or Anna much when she visits. I will admit that Alex pays more rent for the basement apartment and pays extra utilities because the kid is here so often, and she doesn't have us babysit except for Lauren. But Lauren loves kids and gets paid. The problem is, I didn't sign up to live with a kid. If I would have known there was a kid here all the time, I wouldn't have chosen to live here. I talked to Alex yesterday, and I asked her to not have her sister over so often because none of us signed up to live with a 9-year-old. She said Anna is very well behaved and that she keeps Anna in her space so we don't have to be around her. I told her I know she keeps Anna away from us, but I still don't want to live with a kid. She asked me to drop this and said that Anna's dad, they have different dads, is out of the picture and their mom is neglectful. I said I feel bad for her, but that's still not my problem. She and Lauren are mad at me, and Taylor said I'm the only one that has a problem with the kid being here. Am I the jerk for asking my roommate to not have her sister over so often? You'll have my job? Okay, Karen, this will be interesting. So I'm out shopping for a few things. Bread, milk, bin bags, etc. I remember that I need some ham, so I go to the cooked meats aisle and look for something tempting. As I'm searching for something nice, I hear a voice behind me saying, "Excuse me," in a not at all polite manner. I look over my shoulder and see the local Karen. I acknowledge her and take 2 steps to the side, but don't turn around. I feel a tap on my shoulder and the same non-too-polite voice saying, "Excuse me, I'm talking to you. Don't ignore me." I turn around and open my mouth to ask what she wants and why she's being rude. But before I can speak, she starts going off on me for being a lazy member of staff and ignoring her. I say, "If you think I work here, you're wrong. I don't." And she says, "You're just being lazy. I'll have your job." "Really?" I say, badly feigning surprise. "You'll have my job?" "Yes, I will," she says, with a strange mixture of superiority, righteousness, and stupidity. "Okay, suit yourself. You can have it." I waved my hands around in strange shapes and announced, "You are now officially a member of staff." It is said that a picture can speak 1,000 words, but the look on her face at this point just said, "What the heck?" "But I want you to get these things for me. I want," she starts. "Don't ask me. I'm a customer. You should ask a colleague since you work here. In fact, you can help me with what I need." "What? But I don't work here," she says.
Yes, you do. You said you'd have my job, and I gave it to you. Now buzz off and leave me alone. She stomps off, but that wasn't the end of it. Another customer, who's clearly seen the interaction, stopped her halfway up the aisle and said, loudly enough for me to hear, "Oh, finally someone who works here. Can you get that heavy thing off the top shelf?"
Oh, buzz off,
she said, and walked, presumably, out of the shop. Other customer, "You absolute legend." Entitled sister thinks she deserves my house because she has 3 kids. So my grandfather was a pretty wealthy man, and because of it, he and my mother had a rocky relationship and haven't spoken in over 5 years. My 2 sisters turned out just like my mother, a high sense of entitlement. Believe the world owes them everything, and my grandfather's money didn't help this. They expected my grandfather to pay for a lavish lifestyle. Eventually, he ended up cutting them off, which caused them to stop speaking to him. They even tried pressuring me to do the same. I refused. Me and my grandfather were really close. I spent a lot of time at the house. It was one of my favorite places in the world, and I am absolutely thrilled he left it to me. My grandfather was my best friend. He was the first person I came out to when I was 15, and his reaction is still my favorite. But he sadly passed away a few months ago. This wasn't a surprise by any means, as he had been battling cancer for years. Well, my grandfather ended up leaving everything to me and 2 of my cousins he was also close with. I got the family home, which is a beautiful 4-bedroom, 2.5 bathroom house with a pool and a hot tub. I was also left a good chunk of money, which will really help with student loans. One cousin got my grandfather's antique car collection. Not sure if it can really be called a collection, as there are only 3, but my grandfather called it that, so that's what I'm going with. The other cousin got my grandfather's painting collection, which was pretty big and has a few pretty expensive paintings in it. But seeing as she is an artist herself, I doubt she will sell them. I think she actually wants to donate a few of the more well-known ones to our local museum. My mother and sisters got nothing. Well, as you can likely guess, they freaked out. There wasn't much they could do about my cousin, as they didn't really speak to my family for other reasons. But with me, they flipped out. My mom was mad because this was her family home, and she thinks she deserves it. My sister thinks I should give it to her because she's married and has 3 kids, and she needs it more. She already has a nice house, by the way. This one is just more expensive. I do not want to give the house to her. My grandfather wanted me to have it. That's gotta mean something, right? And just because I do not have a family right now doesn't mean I won't in the future. Me and my boyfriend have even talked about it multiple times. Like I said, this place means a lot to me, and I want to keep it. My other sister has no interest in the house, she just wants some of the money I got. She recently got out of prison and is pretty much broke. I wouldn't have had a problem giving her some of the money if it weren't for the fact that before going to prison, she stole a lot of money from me and many other family members, including my grandfather.
I'd think about getting some sort of a restraining order against them. Never underestimate the power of a Karen.
Am I the jerk for not letting my niece use her iPad during our wedding? My wife and I got married September 4th, and this drama is still going on. We paid a lot of money for a videographer to capture our ceremony. We told everyone at the rehearsal dinner we would be having everyone turn their devices off for the ceremony just so that there wouldn't be any distractions. My brother pulled me aside later on to tell me that his daughter, who's 4, would need to have her iPad to get through the ceremony. Otherwise, she would be really noisy and wouldn't sit still and might ruin the day for us. I told him no, she wouldn't be using it because there's a chance she may turn the volume on or something, and I really don't want to take that risk. I thought that was the end of it, but the next day, my brother, who is also my best man, came to me and said that his daughter was having a hard time today and that she would need her iPad. I again told him no. He said that if she didn't have it, she would make a fuss, and the missus wouldn't want that ruining her big day, now would she? And that kind of upset me, because yeah, it's her day, but it's also mine. I'm marrying the woman I love, and we both made this no devices decision together. I told him if he couldn't respect it, then his daughter could wait outside with either him or his wife, but her iPad wouldn't be in there. He was annoyed, but we left it at that. And then it happens. Middle of the ceremony, we hear, "We finally found the perfect house!" And then some fumbling as my sister-in-law is trying to get the iPad to shut off, and my niece starts to whine. Some ad started playing as my niece was playing a game. My wife and I were annoyed, but we, along with everyone else, laughed it off and continued on. During the reception, my sister-in-law and brother-in-law ran up to us, saying they didn't know the volume was up so loud, and they had my niece apologize for it. My wife said it's done and over with, and it was rude of you to do. My bro said it wasn't fair, so I said that it wasn't fair sister-in-law allowed it, seeing as we already talked about it, and that going against what we had already asked of them and the iPad was a major jerk move, and that them not apologizing but having their daughter make a big show of doing so was sending the wrong message, seeing as she's 4 and she doesn't even understand, and that it was them who allowed it to happen. My brother said that it wasn't that deep and that I'm being ridiculous. Then the rest of the reception was kind of awkward, even during the best man speech. He tried to make a joke. Yeah, that was my daughter's iPad making the noise. She likes to be a rule breaker. And it just made my wife and I angry. I've said very few things to him since this happened. My parents are starting to think I'm the jerk for not just moving on and for waiting for him to apologize. Am I the jerk? Edit. I keep seeing this come up about how if we didn't want this to happen, then we should have had a child-free wedding. We essentially did, in the fact that we told everyone, hey, people will be drinking, so if you want to leave your kids at home, that's fine with us. And most people did. My niece came and 4 other kids, one being only 7 months old, and then a 5, a 7, and a 12-year-old. It also helps that naturally, both sides of the family are late-night partiers, so to leave the kids home wasn't a huge offense. And for those asking what we would have done had she instead started fussing and crying, that's fine with us. We would have rather had that instead of a 30-second YouTube ad going on, then an awkward scramble to get it turned off, which threw off the flow of our vows. If she started fussing, that's something we could have laughed about, and her mom would have taken her outside. Instead, we had all the guests turning to look at them in a very awkward display of, you were asked to do one thing. And yes, we still laughed, but for us, it wasn't the same. It really wasn't. As for offering up other solutions for my brother and sister-in-law to use to entertain their daughter, respectfully, that's not my job. I'm not her parent. We told them no devices. We had several options, as people have mentioned, and we are not her parents, so it wasn't on us to offer up alternative suggestions, seeing as we were a little more preoccupied with getting everything in order to be married. Maybe I shouldn't be so bothered by this, but I am, because it was the lack of courtesy and apology on my brother and sister-in-law's behalf. My niece apologizing doesn't really mean anything because she doesn't understand what she did. Her mom handed her the iPad. My niece is 4 and doesn't understand that what happened was rude. She doesn't grasp that yet. It should have been on my brother and sister-in-law to apologize. Am I the jerk for calling my brother-in-law lazy in front of everyone? Last weekend, I invited my husband's 2 brothers and their wives to stay over the weekend and have a birthday party for my husband. My husband's youngest brother arrived on Friday night with his wife and stayed in our guest bedroom, while the eldest brother offered to smoke some pork overnight and bring it to the party. The poor guy was up all night cooking it, and I told him I didn't want him to lose out on his sleep over it, but he insisted. So, on Saturday, I get up early and I'm cooking and baking all day, and my husband, his brother's wives, and his eldest brother are all helping out. Everyone is busting their tails, except the youngest. He's sitting down in the living room playing video games for hours without a single offer to help. Even the few times I hinted to him that I needed help, he came up with some BS excuse why he wasn't going to be able to help out. Fast forward to the party. Everything came out great. All the food was good and everyone was enjoying themselves. And the jerk brother makes a joke about my cooking to everyone at the party. At this point, I had had enough of him, so I told him, "You're one to talk. Everyone helped with the cooking and to put this party together, except for you. You're a lazy and entitled parasite." Now, I know that my retort wasn't the most diplomatic and that I shouldn't have embarrassed him in front of everyone. And my husband got mad at me and said that I was a jerk for calling him out in front of everyone and that I needed to apologize to his brother. I told him I don't owe him an apology at all. Am I the jerk? I feel like one after the fact. I know I should have kept my mouth shut, but I still don't think I should apologize to him. Edit. For those who say that I shouldn't have expected people to help out, I will add that it's an unwritten family rule that when a family member invites others for a dinner or a party, everyone is expected to contribute, either by helping out or bringing a dish. It's always been like that for as long as my husband can remember, and I've adapted to their custom. Edit 2. My brother-in-law always never contributes.
not just at family gatherings, but with anything. My husband's family is very close-knit. Actually, everyone is awesome but him, and they're always helping each other out. He only asks for help, but never helps anyone. In my husband's own words, he always finds a way to worm himself out of helping. Edit 3. My brother-in-law said in front of everyone that my food tasted like prison food. For those wondering if in fact the food tasted bad, it didn't. It tasted delicious. Everyone was complimenting it, and some requested the recipes for some of the dishes, which is what prompted him to make that unsavory joke. He also didn't have a problem with the food, as he had already had 2 servings and was on his way for his 3rd before insulting it. Edit 4. Everyone, even his wife, started asking him for help, and he would still not help out. I feel bad for his wife because it's not just at gatherings, it's with everything. She does everything around the house, from cooking to fixing stuff that gets broken to doing all the errands, and all he does is play video games and watch TV. He's a complete deadbeat. I don't know how she puts up with it. She's got the patience of a saint. Edit 5. Some commenters suggesting putting away our console. The problem is that he has his own and takes it wherever he goes. This time was no exception. As soon as he got up, he connected his console and started playing. Edit 6. Some people have asked why my husband didn't say anything to my brother-in-law first. He didn't have time. As soon as my brother-in-law insulted my food, I snapped back with my insult. I don't know what happened after that because I was seeing red and left the room and went for a walk to calm myself down. I knew if I stayed, I would say a few more choice words to him and would have made things worse. They may have scolded him, I don't know. By the way, thank you for all of your comments, even those that say I'm the jerk. It's very enlightening to see people's opinion of this situation and to make me aware where I went too far.
I don't think you went too far. If homeboy doesn't want you calling him a parasite, maybe he should stop being one.
Sister copied my 5th grade book report. Evil mama bear lets her get away with it. This happened when I was 13 and in middle school. My sister was 10 and in 5th grade at the time. 3 years earlier, when I was in the 5th grade, I did a book report on a light novel I don't really remember, and I got a B+ on the book report. My dad had a habit of filing all the returned school assignments of myself and my sister, and he cataloged them by day, month, year, and topic. I thought his doing so was a bit overzealous, but I didn't really dwell on it. Fast forward 3 years, and one day I noticed my sister came home from school whining about having to do a boring book report. I told her I did a few of them for school in her grade, and they're really not so hard. Just pick a book, read it, and then write about it. Then I brought up the name of the book I'd done a report on at the time and said it might be a good choice for her as it was an easy novel to read with big fonts printed on the pages. Sis had 2 weeks to do the book report, but I never once saw her reading any book at all during that time, and I repeatedly reminded her. She'd just brush me off and say, "I got this." Then one day, my sister comes home all proud of herself that she got a B on her book report, which was odd to me since she really didn't read anything as far as I'd known. Plus, she didn't really care to apply herself. I knew she had the smarts, just not the drive. So out of curiosity, I picked up the report and started to read it. And to my shock, it was just like the one I'd written 3 years earlier. She didn't even change the title. I was furious and called her out for copying my work. Sister just ran into Mom's arms crying. Me, "She copied my old book report. She doesn't deserve this grade." Mom,
No, she didn't. You are mistaken. My little princess wrote this all by herself. She earned that B.
Me, "Fine then. I'll just talk to Dad when he gets home and we'll see who's right."
Don't you talk back to me, young man. Go to your room.
Me, "With pleasure." This was before I got my Nokia cell phone, so as I was walking to my room, I sneakily grabbed the cordless phone from its charger and called my dad from upstairs. He was upset and agreed to look at his records when he got home. Surprise, surprise, when he opened up the file cabinet that had my elementary schoolwork in it, it looked like it had been gone through. We found the original book report pretty easily. It had been sloppily shoved back into the file and was crudely folded in half. We read the title, and sure enough, it was the same. We came out of the office, and my dad asked to see my sister's book report. Mom stood her ground and said that her little princess didn't do anything, but Dad was adamant. Mom tried to double down, but Dad told her if she was so confident Sister didn't copy my work, then to let him read it. So Mom finally handed in the book report without even looking at him and Dad proceeded to compare the two. He got no further than reading the titles of both before Sister started bawling and confessing what she had done. Mom came flying to her aid to hug and kiss her, then chastised us for making her cry. Dad said she ripped off my schoolwork, and if the school found out, she'd have her grade revoked and would likely be punished, which made Sister cry harder. Sister tearfully confessed that a few days earlier she went into Dad's office and looked through my old schoolwork files and found the book report. Then she just handwrote her own version of it that was almost identical and put the original back in the cabinet. After confessing, Sister then ran to my dad and latched onto him while crying her eyes out and saying she'd never do it again. I guess my sister's tears made my dad sympathetic because he said that he wouldn't tell the school that she had cheated, but she was still grounded for doing it, and he expected better from her from then on. I was mad, but my dad told me there was no use since Sister had already been graded on the report and no one noticed. This just made Mom give me an evil smirk, like she was saying, "Ha, I win," because she never enforced Sister's groundings while Dad wasn't home. Then Dad took me upstairs and assured me from now on he'd make sure this didn't happen again by keeping better control of his files. Sister didn't get off completely scot-free though. That Sunday, Dad took me out for ice cream and a trip to the mall, but not her. Sister was screaming and begging to come with us, but Dad told her she didn't deserve it for copying my book report. So in essence, it was my grade and not hers, so I'd be getting the ice cream. That made Mom say she'd go out and buy her a tub of whatever ice cream she wanted, but Sister just cried it was not the same and then ran to her room to scream and pout. That was the best ice cream I'd gotten all year. The following week, my dad got some brand new file cabinets with better locks on them, so nobody could get into them anymore but him. And for those who may be wondering why the teacher didn't notice the book report was the same, my old teacher I had back in 5th grade moved on to another school by the time I was in 6th grade, and since it was elementary, it wouldn't surprise me if copied book reports slipped through the cracks there on many occasions. There are a lot of students to keep track of after all. Am I the jerk for refusing to open the door for my sister when she brought her kids to stay with me? Yesterday at 11 a.m., I was alone at home. Husband went to work early, and I was just starting my daily cleaning routine when the bell rang. I, 30, female, peeked through the hole and saw my sister, who's 36, and her 3 kids, who are 5, 3, and 2. I did not open the door and talked to her behind it, and I'll explain why in a minute. She said she had an argument with her chronically ill husband, male 34, and wanted to once again punish him by keeping the kids away from him until he apologized to her for what he said, which was regular argument stuff. Explanation: she started doing this when he got sick. Every time she gets in an argument with my brother-in-law, she'd take the kids and refuse to bring them back until he apologized to her. He has a medical condition that prevents him from going outside the house, and she has been using that. And instead of taking the kids to our aunt's house, this time she brought them to mine since aunt is out of town. She asked that I take the kids for 2 days, but I refused and pointed out how unacceptable and wrong of her it is to punish her husband, who's already sick, and using the fact that he can't drive to go pick up his kids, or at least see them. She'd keep them away for days. She started talking about how her husband doesn't care about her hurt feelings and how much she does for him. Also, how this method has proven to be effective since it's got him to recognize his wrongdoings and apologize. But I replied that he probably was only apologizing just to see the kids. I said it wasn't fair for the kids either, but she said they agreed to stay with me and told me to open the door because they missed me so much. I refused and said I won't be responsible when brother-in-law finally decides to do something about this and get the cops involved. She yelled she's their mother, so the cops won't do a darn thing about it, and assured me my brother-in-law would never do that, knowing how much she's cared for him. But I stood my ground and said I wouldn't be opening the door, period. She yelled, saying I was unsupportive and selfish to keep my nieces and nephews out and refused to open the door for them. I suggested she go work her issues out like a rational adult and stop pulling stunts like that affect her husband and their kids emotionally and mentally. She took offense to that and said I was clearly on my brother-in-law's side. She shamed me in front of the kids for 10 minutes, then left. Hours later, my dad, who lives in another town, called, shaming me for not opening the door for his grandchildren, then insulting my sister and siding against her. I explained my reasons, but he said the kids are with my cousin and insisted I go pick them up.
My husband said I should have opened the door for the kids and that he could see how Dad would be upset with me for not taking the kids in until my sister's conflict with her husband is resolved. He wants me to go pick the kids up, but I keep refusing. But I feel like I'm unsupportive of my sister. More details about brother-in-law. He has a chronic illness that's gotten worse lately and limited his ability to do most things. To my knowledge, he's catheterized, wears a cannula on a medical device, so he can't drive or walk outside the house. My parents never liked him because he was already sick when my sister married him and said she was just wasting her life with him, but she always says she loves him, but I'm not even sure, judging by her recent actions.
My stomach is churning right now. Some people are just evil.
Don't be a Karen if you don't want to look like a Karen. So I remembered a story of malicious compliance as recounted to me by a good friend of mine. My friend is a hairdresser by trade and works at a very upscale salon. I go to her myself and can attest to her being amazing. Anyway, this salon had one customer who had been passed around from hairdresser to hairdresser, bullying every single new one she saw. This woman was an absolute terror. She made count 'em, three separate hairdressers cry. The only reason she was still a client of the salon was that her mom was friends with the owner. She was a relatively young gal, maybe in her mid-20s, with very long bottle blonde hair, past her waist, that she insisted to everyone who wasn't her hairdresser was her natural color. It was very much not. She went to the salon religiously so no one would ever find out her secret shame. She blamed her hairdresser for all of her hair problems, many of which were the results of heavy bleaching and how much heat she used on her hair and her refusal to follow care instructions, and was never satisfied with anything. So everything shuts down in our state, and she screams at my friend to come do her hair for her because she can't have her boyfriend finding out she's not a natural blonde. Anyway, my friend refuses, and despite Karen's threats, she knows that the salon owner knows she's too darn good at her job and has too loyal a customer base to fire her, so she thinks no more of it until a few months later when the salon reopens, and lo and behold, who should appear in the appointment book but Karen? So the day arrives and Karen shows up with her hair dyed jet black, and not very well dyed either. My friend is shocked because Karen's always made such a big deal about being a blonde, and how even though she gets her hair bleached, she really is a natural blonde and just enhancing her hair color a little. My friend asks Karen what they were doing that day, and Karen demands to be made blonde again. My friend is like, okay, that's going to be a process, because this jerk has used black box dye, which is really hard to get out. For those of you who don't know, getting dyed dark hair to blonde is usually something done in stages, so the hair has a chance to recover a bit between bleaching sessions to avoid breakage. Karen is like,
No, I am going to be blonde when I leave here today, or I am telling your boss that you see clients at home sometimes and getting you fired.
my friend sometimes does friends' hair at home for a lower price because she's a sweetheart, which her boss is fine with. And
It's your fault I had to dye my own hair this color, because my boyfriend would have seen my roots if I hadn't done something.
my friend is tired of Karen's BS at this point, but it's a slow day and she has time. She explains to Karen that if she takes her blonde all in one go, her hair will be fried and she'll likely end up having to lose a lot of length. Karen scoffs and rolls her eyes and is like,
That's never happened before, and my hair's so healthy, I'm sure it will be fine if you don't mess it up.
Friend recommends at least using Olaplex, a product that helps prevent damage. Karen says she thinks it's a scam to overcharge customers and won't pay for it. Cue malicious compliance. Friend is like, okay, but makes several coworkers be witnesses that this is what Karen is asking for after friend explained the risks. Friend meanwhile has formulated a fiendish scheme. After that, friend goes through the whole process of bleaching Karen's hair. She has to do it like 4 times or something, and she checks with Karen after each one that she's absolutely sure she has to be all the way back to champagne blonde by the end of the day, and recommends stopping at some of the nice auburn or strawberry blonde shades in between for now. But Karen insists her boyfriend hates her hair anything but her natural blonde. My friend knows she will refuse, because when has a Karen ever decided at the 11th hour to be reasonable? With each bleaching, there's more breakage, and Karen's hair feels worse. My friend knows Karen's hair won't survive this, but Karen absolutely refuses to let her stop. Eventually, at long last, my friend manages to get Karen's hair to the required level, and so she starts to rinse Karen's hair. It starts breaking off in her hand. The length of her hair is melted, fried, destroyed. My friend gets the bleach out and immediately conditions the ever-loving heck out of it while explaining to Karen that exactly what my friend said would happen has happened. Karen says she must be exaggerating and insists it's fine. Friend wraps what's left of Karen's hair in a towel and takes her back over to the station where she shows Karen the problem. Everything past a little bit beyond her chin length is pretty much gone. Karen shrieks and accuses my friend of everything under the sun. Incompetence, operating without a license. She most definitely has her license. A personal vendetta, etc., etc. My friend eventually calms her down and tells her she'll do her best to cut it so it looks decent for free. She even has the perfect cut in mind. It'll suit Karen perfectly. My friend gives Karen the sharpest, most beautifully cut angled bob you've ever seen. I've seen it thanks to my friend showing me Karen's Insta, that despite the incredible precision and skill showcased, is unequivocally and perfectly the Karen. Blown out and styled to, "Can I speak to your manager?" perfection, Karen starts crying because the cut makes her look 40. She wants to speak to the manager. My friend gets the manager and Karen throws a fit, threatening to sue, and how dare they, and how his employees do this to mock her, and so on and so forth, while my friend stands there looking completely innocent. The boss then asks friend her side of the story, and the other hairdressers back her up and say that the cut is just her trying to make the best of what's left of her hair. Even the boss by now is sick of Karen's BS, and Karen is forced to pay the huge sum of money owed for how much time was spent bleaching her hair, much of which is gone now, and leaves swearing never to come back. Her boyfriend, a cop, calls up later and threatens to assault my friend for doing that to Karen's hair against his wishes, and my friend tells him if he tries anything, she's going to tell his superiors and every news agency in the city. Nothing further happens, but he eventually dumps Karen because he doesn't like girls with short hair. Edit. Unfortunately, Karen's Karen-ness cannot be attributed to her boyfriend's influence. She was like that long before they got together. She had been going to that hair salon since she was a teenager. The older stylists who had been there a while told my friend stories of her antics and had always been a terror. I think this is more a case of birds of a feather than a girl scared into acting unreasonable. Am I the jerk for saying my life is tougher than my sister's, who is a stay-at-home mom? I, female 28, am unmarried, and my sister, Susan, female 37, is a stay-at-home mom to 4 kids, who are 13, 11, 10, and 7. We stay in different states. She chose to become a stay-at-home mom to her 4 kids voluntarily. My brother-in-law earns very well, and they have quite a comfortable life, if that detail matters. Susan has always complained about how tough her life is, how hard it is to bring up her 4 kids, and has compared it to my easy life. While it has always rubbed me the wrong way, I've never really said anything, because undoubtedly, it really must be hard bringing up 4 kids. Over the past few years, despite my parents, my other sister Lisa, and I living in the same state, Susan has always demanded we go to her place for Christmas because managing the kids is too hard, and being a mom is incredibly difficult. Last year, I even suggested a retreat that would have been equally distant for her and us, but she refused, saying it was just too hard and I wouldn't understand since I don't have kids and am not married. This year, she expects me to make the trip to her place again. Lockdown, anyone? I refused. I may not have 4 kids, but I have an extremely stressful job. I work about 60 hours a week, and I also do not have financial security that she does to even risk taking a few days off and have a significant amount of student debt to pay off. I studied abroad, but am earning in a local currency, so the gap is even harder to bridge. Also, Lisa has some health issues, and therefore, I'm the one who does her grocery shopping and such because it's unsafe for her to venture out now. When Susan demanded Lisa, my parents, and I would have to come to her place again this year for Christmas, not to mention I'll have to drive and pay for fuel, I point blank refused. She screamed at me and told me I'm selfish and that I'd never know the amount of work it takes to be a mother and that it was no surprise no guy wanted to marry me. I also lost my temper and told her it isn't an achievement to give birth to 4 kids, that she doesn't have to worry about paying her rent or being able to afford her next meal, and there are plenty of life struggles that are tougher than having kids. Lisa is on my side, but she's always had a soft spot for me. My parents think I'm a huge jerk disrespecting Susan and are temporarily not speaking to me. So Reddit, I know it's hard to be a mom, but am I the jerk? We'll accept any judgment.
Daughter-in-law steals my grandson's money, so I'm suing her. Hi, I am a grandma and I own a pretty good business in accounting. I'm not filthy rich, but I surely have a good amount of money and I've set aside a lot of money for my grandson for college, or for a house if he decides not to go to college. Every year for his birthday for the past 8 years, I've given him around $800 a year for Christmas and his birthday so he can enjoy himself. It's quite a hefty sum of money, but he is a great kid and I believe he deserves the money. He's 15 at the moment. Well, recently he came forward and told me for 5 years that my daughter-in-law has stolen a lot of money from him and some from my son as well. It turned out that she was spending a lot of money on herself and decided to pretend that my grandson's money would be going towards college funds. It was usually through gift cards, so how would it even go towards a college in the first place? Not only this, but apparently he was barely even fed and didn't get basic necessities a lot of the time. 6 years ago, she broke up with my son and dated a man whose salary was more than enough to make sure my grandson was getting what he needs. They weren't in poverty. I was furious. Not only was the money I gave my grandson to have fun being used by someone who I didn't even like in the first place, but my grandson was being neglected when they could have given him the basic necessities. I recently emailed my daughter-in-law, telling her how much she owes me, and if she doesn't pay it back by the end of the year, I'm getting my lawyers involved. Well, she was furious and started using the fact that her boyfriend is a military sniper as a way to threaten me into dropping the charges. I told her I refused to do so and ignored her after that, knowing if she continued to threaten me, all she's doing is incriminating herself. My other son, who is also an employee of mine, said I was being too harsh on her and I should have just let it go, and that I already have enough money as it is to pay him back. Am I the jerk? And thus it ends. So, way back in the distant past of spring 2020, everyone suddenly realized, oh crap, this is actually going to be a thing. Panic set in, hand sanitizer and toilet paper vanished from shelves, and people stopped traveling. The hotel industry as a whole was dealt a grievous blow, with many trying desperately to stay afloat. We were also affected, dropping hours, switching to a weird 4-shift day, trying to avoid layoffs and give everyone at least something in their paychecks. It was looking grim at the Locking Tea Hotel. But then, we got thrown a lifeline. During the height of the panic, it was decided that the homeless population was incredibly at risk, both for catching the disease and spreading it. Thus, it was in the best interest to help them isolate. Enter a small, fledgling county program. They had been operating a pilot project for a housing-first approach to helping the homeless. For the unfamiliar, this basically amounts to giving the homeless a place to live. Not just a cot in a shelter, but an actual apartment or tiny house. This is actually cheaper than the costs of the usual methods of dealing with the homeless, which is to say, trying to make it so unpleasant they move somewhere else. This tiny little project had been seeing staggeringly good results, better than all other homeless outreach programs. It turns out that when you help people with their problems, rather than punishing them for them, they get back up on their feet and stay there. A place to call home, a social worker, and some medical assistance. Good stuff. Well, along comes lockdown, and the governor's office calls these folks up, asks if they can scale it up by a couple orders of magnitude. FEMA funds are unlocked for this, and the tiny project embarks upon an epic quest to protect the county's homeless. Our hotel is one of 3 contacted in our town. The deal is good. 3/4 our usual rate paid for the rooms, about 6 to 8 months, an on-site social worker and security guard. Clients are to be hand-picked, nice, quiet folks, maybe even some families. My regular readers know all too well how that went. The program was overwhelmed by the scope of the project. They didn't have the raw manpower. The homeless were packed into the building as quickly as possible and told to isolate. The hotel's tone changed, becoming darker and more stressful. The taco place closed down. An emotional support unicorn was brought in. There were problems almost immediately. While 9 out of 10 clients were extremely grateful for the new digs, the remaining 10th basically said, "Whoa, free hotel room," and invited their friends over to party. I mean that literally. I first met Mike, telling him that no, there are no dang parties in the rooms. I will not miss the 2 veterans who got a room together and despite repeated warnings, smoked constantly in the room. I will not miss the guy in 101 who was not housebroken and literally wasted away his stimulus check with cheap beer. We had to tear out the carpet to the floorboards after he left. I will not miss Cindy, who had the phone ringing every 20 minutes all night long for various things she needed and imagined. The project was more than just housing. Meals were provided, as well as some canned goods, bread, and other goodies. Also, weekly laundry service, bringing back everyone's clothes fluffy and smelling nice. I will not miss Bo, who passed himself off as a helpful and kind person while actually selling things he shouldn't have been out of his room. I will not miss Mike, whose exploits were the stuff of legends, with whole sagas about his refusal to leave. I will miss Bob, developmentally disabled and in a wheelchair. I haven't seen him in over a year. I hope he got a place at a care home. I will not miss Bruce, who stole his room by kicking him out. Now, part of the problem we had was that we had tried to be a regular hotel and a shelter at the same time. This resulted in a lot of horrible reviews, as you might imagine, trying to have our cake and eat it too. I will not miss Frank, who was not part of the program and liked to steal coffee and scream about his stuff going missing. I will also not miss the guy with the sideshow Bob Fro, who would also steal coffee and insist I was the devil. I will not miss Jared, who shifted a lot of stolen bicycles during his time here, and whose girlfriend was also a piece of work. I will miss Steve and Chris, a veteran in a wheelchair and his helper buddy. Turns out I used to work with Chris over 20 years ago at the Pink Spoons ice cream place. Good guys, just a bad hand dealt. As many problems as we had, things could have been worse. The motel with the number went absolutely feral. We're talking TVs thrown out the window levels of problems. I will miss Dan, who is a very quiet, meek sort of fellow who used to be a professor at the local university until his compulsion for cleanliness made it impossible to hold a job. Hope he's okay. I will miss Roxanne, who is being taken advantage of by her husband Charlie, who I will not miss because he's a total rotten jerk. I hope she gets away from him and gets some help. After some time, things settled. Horrible people were kicked out, while nice people got placed in new homes. Still a considerable amount of shenanigans, but at least I didn't need to call the police every night, and the hallways were not a place to play Guess That Smell. I will not miss Irene, who believes that rules do not apply to her because it is her daughter visiting. I will not miss Joe. I will miss who he was when he was taking his antipsychotic medication, a quiet, friendly person. Without them, he was a terror who destroyed the lobby. I will miss Joanne. Despite the elderly gal's loud screaming out in the lot, she was the cause of the bulk of the complaining we got while open to regular guests, but we still liked her. The project got its feet under it. Still not as good as we had been promised, but people were getting helped. One gal had tears in her eyes as she told me she was getting a place for the first time in 20 years. Good feelings there. I will miss Bill, the elderly security guard who was once a member of San Francisco PD. We had some nice chats. I will not miss the one confirmed case we had. The whole thing worked. Who was still hooking up with clients while contagious. Yeah. I will miss Roger, whose long and painful battle with diabetes ended in our hotel. Rest in peace. The clients were also getting some medical care. Everyone had their shots back in March, ahead of a lot of folks. More clients got placed in transitional and even permanent housing. For all the suffering and headaches, the program was working. I will not miss Wendy. She was lovely and fun to talk to, but her descent into alcohol was brutal. I will miss Barbara. Surprisingly, she seems to have got her paranoia under control, which will help her future tremendously. I will not miss John and Marcia. Don't know how many chances we gave them, but it was too many. Feel bad for their doggies and hope they get help for their drinking problems. The program kept getting extended, then extended again. They asked us for another month to get the good half of the guests placed, then found out the apartment vouchers didn't kick in until later, then another extension, literally at 2 in the morning the night before. This could not have been worse. With the last extension, we missed move-in week for the university. Our lot should have been full of moving vans and pickups with mattresses in the back, gaggles of bright-eyed students and parents having flashbacks to that first day at kindergarten. We had people making reservations 4 months in advance, with us thinking it would be clear by then. Instead, we had to walk everyone. This went about as well as you would imagine. I do not envy the manager. Still, the county is paying for the rooms we have to relocate, as well as any rooms that aren't rentable. But that final deadline has come. They have all left. The program is done. It has helped a lot of folks. Mission accomplished. Despite the rough times and horrible tales I've had to share, it has been a good thing, and I'm happy to have helped. And so, tonight, the hotel is empty, but for myself and a snoozing unicorn. The hotel is effectively shut down. We do not have rooms available. The county wants to bring in their own inspectors and contractors for the repairs and refurbishments. We aren't exactly sure how long this will take. So there we have it, the end of 18 long months, a very good thing done, but shadowed by the 10% being completely horrible. I look forward to normal problems again and will share any good stories that happen. For now, I'm enjoying the peace. You sure you want me to take part in the go-kart race? Okay, boss. A few years back, I started my first job as a mechanic and was informed of a mandatory monthly kart race in the local track, which was promoted by my boss and the owner of the company. He didn't care if you enjoyed it or not. He booked the time slot and we all had to show up after working hours and paying our own ticket to drive. It was supposed to be a team-building exercise, and I could see the boss really liked race cars through the various pictures and trophies in his office. During the week, in anticipation to the event, boss would motivate and participate in setting the mood for the upcoming race. It was the only topic that week, and I was told by colleagues that this was really important. I knew that on the evening of the race, I had to pick up my girlfriend, and that would clash with the race. So a couple of days before, I told my supervisor that I would not attend the race. It was after hours and on my dime anyway, so I didn't think it would be a problem. Some 20 minutes later, I'm summoned to the boss office, and he's not looking happy. He tells me that building the team spirit is one of his priorities and that I'm new there, so I was to give a lot of focus to this monthly event if I want to keep working there, because it was part of the core culture of the company. I really needed the job, so I just said, "Sure thing, boss." On the evening of the event, I drive to the kart track and, upon arrival, I see my colleagues all in jeans and t-shirts and my boss in full ballerina attire. He had racing overalls, racing boots, gloves, and even a custom helmet. It dawned on me the reason for the event and why so much attention was given to it. Kart racing was his thing. With about 15 racers, I asked to start dead last. Boss man listens to me talking and intervenes in front of everyone that we were there to race and not to just drive around slowly. Up until that point, I wasn't really paying much attention, but I decided to comply and show how much the core corporate culture was important to me. Starting from last, I proceeded to overtake all the other karts, including boss man on the outside of a fast corner. Overtaking on the outside is often seen as a bold, arrogant move. After just a few more laps, I reached him again, and as I was about to lap him, he went into the pits and stepped down. I duly won the race, and as I left the track into the bar, the real team building event, someone tells me that the boss had left. At the bar, the topic of the evening was how I had outraced everyone and how the boss, who had won all races since ever, was livid with my performance. Too bad for him. I guess I forgot to add to my resume that I had raced karts competitively as a kid, so I knew what I was doing and shattered his Ricky Bobby dream. After that, I was always courteously invited, but never again required to show up to his events. I went a few times, but arrived late on purpose, so I would just take part on the bar thing and not the race.
Talladega Nights for the win.
Am I the jerk for favoring one niece over my other nieces and nephews? I, 25 female, have a niece who's 6 from my older sister who's 32. I heard through the family vine that my sister was pregnant, so I reached out to her to congratulate her, but she didn't seem all interested in her pregnancy. After she gave birth, she signed over my niece to the father's side of the family and moved on with her life. Later, getting engaged and having 3 kids with another guy. Almost a year later, I found out from another relative that she gave her because she didn't like the way she looked. For reference, she has a different complexion, brown eyes, and type 4 hair. And she told her father,
"You either take her before I leave the hospital or she goes into the system."
When I confronted my sister about it, she said that she wasn't what she was looking for in a baby and I should mind my business because she's not mine. I tried to ask her information about the father's side as I wanted to reach out to see if it was okay to be a part of her life. No one would tell me anything. I have in the past reached out to her about my other nieces and nephews to be a part of their lives, but she didn't seem too interested. During the 2020 lockdown, I felt it was the perfect time to look for my niece. I found her aunt on social media. I messaged her explaining who I was and had asked if it was okay if I could be a part of my niece's life. She contacted her father and grandmother to set up a time to talk. After some talking, they agreed I could, but after some time of getting to know me, as they didn't want my niece getting attached and I bouncing later on, leaving her wondering where I went. After 2 weeks of getting to know the family, they introduced me to my niece and we instantly bonded. We talk almost every day and she calls me TT. I'm on good terms with her whole side of the family. Her grandmother says she appreciates all the effort I put into being a part of her life and can see how much my niece adores me. This year, my niece has started school, so I bought her a whole bunch of clothes and school supplies. The sister posted pictures and videos of the gift on Instagram, so this is where we currently are. My sister has a fake profile and saw the posts.
She's saying I'm selfish for contacting them when she told me not to. How could I be favoring my niece over my other nieces and nephews? I reminded her I've tried countless times to reach out to her and to build a relationship with them, but she's always shut me down. She said if she knew I had money to spend like that on the kids, then she would have been okay with it. She wanted my niece's info so she could reach out to her, and I told her it wasn't my place to give it to her and I'd have to ask. She said,
But I'm her mommy.
I admit I got mad and lost it on her for abandoning my niece because of how she looked. She told my whole family I'm trying to replace her and steal her life. My family started calling me, texting me, and telling me I'm selfish for choosing her over the other kids. Mom accuses me of forgetting her birthday. I proceed to forget her birthday every year. Every year, I used to make a big thing out of her birthday. One year, I took the entire day off. We were in the middle of a big project delivery at work, so I worked overnight to meet my target for the day I was taking off. The year prior to that, I had bought her a gold chain and a pendant with her birthstone. She returned it to the jeweler's the next day as she felt the chain was too thin. I had just begun earning that year, so I didn't have a lot of savings. I felt bad about her not keeping my gift, even for a single day, but then I thought the next birthday I would get her things she likes. I had a bouquet of orchids delivered to her, took her out for a movie and lunch, then took her shopping where I bought her a handbag and 2 to 3 sets of footwear. I spent almost my entire salary on her. The next day, which happened to be a Sunday, and I had an off, her friends came over and they asked how I celebrated her birthday, and she goes,
Oh, she didn't do anything. In fact, she came home from work at 4 a.m.
I was thinking, yeah, right. I did that because I wanted to be tension-free when I spend the day with you, Mom. Then one of them saw the bouquet that was set at the centerpiece in the living room and asked if it was a gift for my dad or my sister. She said it was for me. Her friends were like, what else did you expect her to do? I gleefully enumerated in detail everything I did for her, and she sheepishly told her friends she forgot all about those things. Not to miss a beat, I went, it was yesterday, so it's not like you didn't remember. This was the last time I did anything special for her birthday, and it was over 20 years ago. These days, I just order Chinese takeout on her birthday. P.S. Mom and I have always had a troubled relationship. She never acknowledged anything I did for her, and she loves to project that I don't do anything at home or for her and Dad. For years, it used to hurt me that she constantly belittled me. Then, I figured out the perfect revenge. If I ever hear her belittle me, I proceed to act exactly as she's advertised. So if she says I don't help with household chores, I stop doing my share. She can't even complain after that, as she's already badmouthed me. Now she has to either make do without help, or she has to admit that she maligned me unnecessarily. It took time to drive the lesson home, and by time, I mean a few years and lots of conversations where I reminded her of specific instances. She stopped her behavior, but I'm still not celebrating her birthday. To be fair, I don't celebrate mine either. Am I the jerk for telling my husband's friend he isn't welcome in our house until he starts calling my son by his real name? I'm female, 27, and my husband, who's 29, has a friend, a man who's 30 from college, who he calls brother. They're inseparable. They hang out together a lot and are very close. His friend tends to act rudely sometimes. He's stubborn and thinks he's some sense of humor. I tolerate his behavior since it's not that weird, but things got worse when I got pregnant. He started calling my unborn son Thomas, even though we told him I picked my grandfather's name for my son. He kept doing it even after my son was born. Not only that, but he'd post pictures of my son on Facebook and type Tommy instead of my son's original name, which got people confused. I talked to my husband and then explained to his friend that he should stop calling my son Thomas, but he kept doing it even more. He even came up with more nicknames besides the name itself. It all came to a head last night when my husband's friend visited us while my family was visiting. Once he walked in, he repeatedly started calling my son Thomas. Everyone was confused. I felt awful. I angrily corrected him in front of everyone and told him that my son's name is not Thomas. In his defense, he said that Thomas was a lot cooler and a better name than the one I picked. My family heard and were hurt, since that was my grandfather's name. I told him to stop calling him that, and he said he can call him Thomas while we call him whatever. No problem. I got mad and told him he's no longer welcome in our house until he learns to call my son his real name and stop this disrespect. My husband's friend argued with me and then left. It was awkward. My husband said his friend wants to use this name and we should just accept it,
but I humiliated him and embarrassed him by berating him in front of my family, then kicking him out. He went on about him being our son's uncle, and I should respect that. I stood my ground and told him his friend isn't welcome or even allowed to see our son unless he agrees to call him by his name. This upset my husband, and now he's saying his friend isn't speaking to him, and I might have ruined their 10 years of friendship with what I did. He added that I should stop trying to control what comes out of other people's mouths and respect their opinions, just like I should respect that his friend thinks the name my son has is stupid. Am I the jerk? Was I being controlling? Editing to say that my husband's friend felt so strongly about the name to the point where he kept nagging us about choosing it before my son was born. When I tried to talk to him about it, he said after we ignored his name choice, then at least he gets to use it and I shouldn't get too upset about it. Well, who do you think is the jerk? OP or the uncle? Please let us know.
Hey, maybe he just really loves Thomas the Tank Engine.
Entitled father steals money as payment for a good deed. I was working on the tills at my supermarket serving customers during the school rush. It's around 4 p.m. I had just got done serving an elderly gentleman and was now serving a middle-aged man and his daughter. The previous customer was stood to the side putting away his loyalty card and bank card when I noticed he had dropped his bank card instead of putting it away. The father who I was serving, now referred to as Entitled Dad, quickly ran over and grabbed his card. I assumed he was going to return it, but instead he ran back to the till and tapped the old man's card on the reader to pay for his shopping before grabbing his items and running after the old man. I had no customers after Entitled Dad, so I approached the two as they were talking and overheard the Entitled Dad saying,
You dropped your card back there, mate. Can't be losing that.
He then promptly handed over the card and turned to walk away. I intervened and told the old man that Entitled Dad had used his card to pay for his shopping. I also waved to our on-duty security guard to stop the Entitled Dad, which he did. Myself and the old man walked down to the Entitled Dad, and I asked him to stay put while I called a manager down. Entitled Dad plays dumb, spouting,
You have no right to stop me. I need to get my daughter home. This is false imprisonment,
etc. Once the manager arrived, I explained what had happened, and this jerk had the audacity to say,
I could have kept this card and used a lot more. Is that what you wanted me to do? He shouldn't be complaining about crap. I only used a bit.
He then turned to the old man and said something equally disgusting.
Just consider it compensation for giving it back to you.
At this point, the old man was asking if he could get his money back. I headed back to my till and printed a copy of the last receipt, took the old man to the customer service desk, got his transaction refunded, and he was happy to leave there. He didn't want to press charges for theft or anything like that. We made Entitled Dad pay for his shopping, and he stormed off. And yes, he's now banned from the store. To the table I had today. You are classless, and your kid was embarrassed. I had a table today that was a couple, and the husband was introducing his baby mama to his family. He was military, and I guess he's been busy on his time away. The couple also had a brand new baby that they were showing off. Nice folks. They were the dude's mom, sister, and aunt. They ordered a big chicken nacho to start, which I promptly put in. Mind you, I was captain on a party of 25 and finishing them up, and the host told me that they may have a few minute wait at the table. They were cool, at first. Once the food came out, the complaints started. I checked on them multiple times in passing, and nobody asked for anything. They, of course, asked for waiters for the table, and also each had a beer or mocktail. Nobody asked for refills or to order another. They didn't have a single auto refill drink, but okay, maybe I wasn't super attentive. Anyway, the mom goes to the front and has a hissy fit, and my manager deals with her, but she pulls me aside to say that she was watching me and that she knows I did my best with them, even if the food was kind of late, behind our party of 25 regulars. She's gonna comp 4 cheesecake slices, and I shouldn't worry about them. I go and drop the discounted check, and I hear the aunt say,
I'm gonna order cheesecake for all of us and get the whole bill taken care of.
The sister and mom both cringe, visibly, and make eye contact with me. I drop the free $50 of cheesecake and bring the fussy toddler a free milk just to show I care. The aunt stares at the check and then violently snatched it. I watched the new baby mama look speechless. I can only imagine that she's been dealing with this jerk for hours or days, which is rapidly approaching her limit. She's dressed like a crunchy hippie mom and is super sweet whenever I come back to the table. She isn't a problem, and I imagine she's served before. You'll see why. Not 5 minutes after the $40 check is dropped, my manager finds me and we go to look at ring times and such. She wants to make sure I did my best before she sticks up for me. Everything checks out and she decides it isn't worth the trouble and comps the entire bill. They seem satisfied and leave finally. On the way out, they called me slow and shiftless and say I should work somewhere else. I laugh in response because forget them and I wish them a lovely evening. I knew I wasn't going to get tipped and just start to bust the table once they're out of view. I found a 20 by where the sister was sitting and a crisp 50 in the middle of the table. I'm betting the dude left that. As I finish up, I see the baby mama speaking to my manager, who gestures towards me and I walk over. She smashes a crumpled 100 into my hand and whispers, "I'm so sorry. I know you did your best with them." Not gonna lie, y'all, I almost cried. I simply nodded and said thanks so much and that I hoped to see her and the baby again. She thanked me again and walked off. I'm a career bartender and server. I paid real money to get a degree in hospitality and I take pride in my work. Forget you to every single person who decides to mess that up just because they can. I imagine the aunt thinks she did something by scoring free food for everyone, but all she did was alienate her nephew and her sister further. My mother forced me to ride a horse. I got hurt. My mother is not a good person, and when thinking of ways to describe her, a few names come to mind. Annie Wilkes from Misery and Margaret White from Carrie, just to name a few. Stephen King depicted my mother quite nicely in those books. My younger sister was my mom's golden child. She lived up to all of my mother dearest's high expectations and liked doing everything that our mom did, like riding horses. I was never interested in doing any of it, probably because of her poor treatment towards me for most of my childhood. My mom and dad had separated when I was very young, but they were civil around each other for the benefit of me and my siblings. At this point, my dad and family members on my dad's side didn't know the things my mom did to me and my brother. I can remember this day so vividly. We were visiting my aunt and her husband, my dad's sister, who lived on a farm. They were all interested in riding horses, but knew that I wasn't, which was never an issue to them. My mother, on the other hand, wasn't so understanding. My sister, 5 at the time, was riding around on a pony with my uncle walking beside her, and I was sitting on the veranda watching her. My brother had walked off down the driveway a few hours before this, so he was nowhere in sight. While sitting and watching, my mother walked up to me. My dad was with my aunt on the other side of the farm. Mom,
Why won't you come and ride with your sister?
me, because I don't want to. Mom,
Don't be a spoiled brat. Get up off your lazy butt now.
me, Mom, you know I don't like riding horses and I'm not good at it. Please don't make me. Mom, getting visibly angry.
Get up now, you lazy little jerk.
She grabbed me and pulled me hard and fast off of the chair. I fell down and screamed out in pain.
Stop!
My wrist! Mom,
Stop being a sook and get up.
my wrist hurt so bad and began to throb in pain, but whenever I said something about it, Mom just accused me of faking it to get out of doing things. She walked me over to where my dad and aunt were, her dragging me by my wrist, and when we got there, my dad noticed I was crying. Dad, what's wrong? Are you okay? Mom,
She's fine. She wants to ride a horse.
me, no I don't. I was cut off.
Yes, you do. You want to ride the big horse, don't you?
All of my objections were ignored by my mom, and she made my dad help me onto a horse. The big horse was a Clydesdale. Anyone who knows about horses will know that a Clydesdale is far too big for an average inexperienced horse rider, let alone an 8-year-old. And this horse was easily spooked, so having a new person on his back that didn't know what they were doing was enough to spook him. He jerked forward quickly and knocked me off. I landed in the grass with my hands taking most of the impact, which made the pain in my wrist even more. The impact wasn't hard enough to break it, but it was already broken before I'd gotten onto the horse. My mom came rushing over to me to see if I was okay. Mom, doing her best fake concerned mother act.
Oh, you poor thing. Are you okay? Let me help you up.
Me, my wrist, it hurts. Mom,
Oh no, you must have broken it when you fell.
Dad took me to the hospital and it was broken. When I told Dad what she had done, he didn't believe me. Not because he was a neglectful parent, but because he saw me fall onto my hands, so he put 2 and 2 together. Most of my cries for help as a kid fell on deaf ears. I spent the next 8 weeks with my wrist in a cast, which made school hard, as I couldn't hold a pen. It was my right wrist and I'm right-handed. I want to say that this is the worst thing my mother has ever done, but I'm sad to say it isn't. I'm no longer in contact with her, and my life is better without her in it. Edit. There seems to be a misunderstanding about my father enabling her, so I wanted to clarify.
He didn't know what she was like back then. My mother was very good at covering her tracks and making what she did look like accidents. It wasn't until many years after this that he began to see who she really was. In case you're wondering, my sister and I are really close now, and I hold no resentment towards her for being the favorite child. She hates her as much as I do now and isn't in contact with her either. Karen left me a 0% tip, so I gave her a piece of my mind. It's a standard Friday night, just getting started when my manager gives me a table, normally the host's job, and tells me that this couple gave them a really hard time at the host stand and to anticipate their bad attitude. No problem. I'm usually the go-to guy in these situations, and 9.5 times out of 10, I'll turn it around and end up with 20% in my pocket. Well, not today. I greet the table, husband and wife, mid to late 60s by the look of it, with bread and a drink list. I immediately notice the wife has like a psychotic resting jerk face, by the way, is complaining about the temperature and the lighting. Both things I can adjust, so I oblige and get the air and lighting for the whole restaurant to her optimal levels. I come back with her tap Chardonnay and ask her if everything is to her liking. With the resounding, "Nah," I ask for their entree orders. Hubby gets a ribeye and mashed potatoes. Wife gets a lobster crunch roll, sushi for you East Coasters, as her entree. Fast forward a few minutes. Food has gone out. I drop by to check on them. Wife says her lobster roll is terrible. She had eaten 1/4 of it and wanted to know what I planned to do about it. I told her she wouldn't be charged for the sushi and that I would be happy to bring her a menu or get her something else started. She gets all fussy over the fact that her husband's food is out and she doesn't want to wait, and the husband, who is a trooper by the way, kept complimenting me and the food, interjected, "Just bring a menu." The moment I dropped the menu, I made a recommendation that she try our short ribs, as it's a dish we generally can have ready in under 5 minutes. Again, she gets all fussy, and her husband says to her, "You love short ribs, you get it all the time." Finally, and with great reluctance, she asks me to bring her the short ribs, but only if we modify the ingredients to her liking. Well, of course, we're the type of restaurant to wipe you clean if you asked us to, no issue. I bring it out for her while her husband still has most of his steak. First reaction,
What is all this crap?
"Oh, miss, that's a beef-based gravy, as it says on our menu. I can have my chefs remove it for you if you'd like. It's really no trouble." She throws her fork at the table and readjusts her plate in front of her,
No, it's fine.
and then starts angrily scraping the gravy off with her steak knife. I walked away laughing under my face mask. Over the next 5 minutes, I watched her absolutely scarf down half of the short rib, so I had to assume it was good. I dropped by to check. "Is this one tasting better than the lobster roll?" She fires back quickly.
Well, it's not what I ordered. Matter of fact, we're all done. You can pack everything up.
Motions towards her husband's steak, which he's literally taking a bite of. So I took his steak out from under him and packed up the food. Offered dessert. No, thank God. Here's your check whenever you're ready. I took off the lobster roll, but you best believe I was going to charge her for the short ribs, considering she ate half and took the rest to go. To my surprise, they put their card in the book, so I went and ran their check. On the drop-off, before I could say anything, the wife says,
I just want to let you know I'm not leaving you a cent, and here's why. I can't believe you would have the audacity to charge me for the short ribs and for my wine when you guys couldn't make the meal I wanted how I wanted it. This was ridiculous.
And without skipping a beat, I snapped back. I completely understand how you might feel that way, but I would just like to let you know that I have very little control over the quality of the food as a server, and furthermore, I have no control over our policy as far as what we charge when we have to replace an item. I totally would have gotten them drinks or dessert or something if not for her toxic attitude. At every opportunity, I tried my best to provide you with a good experience, and if you feel that you didn't have one today, then I completely understand why you wouldn't want to leave a tip. Aside from that, folks, thanks for stopping by, and I hope y'all have a great night. Mic drop. Of course, she went and chewed my manager out on the way out the door, but he came and commended me and agreed that we don't need that type of clientele coming back anyways. I'd be happy to cancel your account. You call Dish Network customer service and get so mad at the agent that you scream, "I want to cancel my account." and they transfer you to another representative. I used to be that guy. It's not as fun of a job as one might expect, but with 99% of the callers screaming at you for any number of reasons that you had no control over. So you had to find a way to keep yourself sane. I stayed near or at the top of the stats leaderboard for customers saved so I could pull crap like this. One day, a representative had a caller who only gave him enough information to pull up his account and told him that he wanted to cancel his account. So I pulled up the customer's account and saw he had been a customer for 8+ years, which meant he was practically VIP. But I pulled up his billing info and saw that for at least the previous 2 years, oldest records I had access to, he'd been receiving $25 off his bill every month. The amount you could discount the bill also determined how long the discount lasted. $25 only went for 6 months, so he had called in at least 4 times before this, demanding to cancel his account until he got his $25 off. Now, I'm a man of principle, and I don't believe a person should get rewarded for being a crappy person. So I accept the transfer, and this guy came on the phone with the TV playing in the background and being a jerk, but also sounding almost bored with the game and says, "Cancel my account." Disapproved response. "I'm sorry to hear you want to cancel your account. Can I ask why you're thinking of leaving?" Get a reason, make 2 offers to keep them around, then cancel if they still aren't willing to stick around. My response. "I'd be happy to cancel your account." Clicked a couple of buttons and his TV went absolutely silent. Then I proceeded to read the script they gave us on how to return the equipment until he shouted over me asking what I just did. "I canceled your account per your request, sir. The boxes will arrive in 7 to 10 business days." Again, dude's outraged, demanding I turn his TV back on. "I'm sorry, sir. I don't understand. Do you want me to cancel your account or not? Because I can turn it back on, but I won't give you a discount off your bill, and I'll be leaving clear notes for any future representatives telling them not to give you a discount either. So, would you like me to reactivate your account, or would you rather I send out the boxes?" As I expected, he told me to turn it back on. In the end, he tried again to get some sort of a discount, which I refused, and offered to downgrade his account if he wanted to save money, which he refused and hung up in frustration. If I could have kept tabs on him, I would have, because I was curious if anyone would reapply the discount or if he would leave. A bonus is, I still had a few more confirmations to go through before the account was actually considered canceled, so the call counted as a save for my stats. Edit. And yes, I intentionally acted like a jerk, but simply because of the last person acted like a jerk, or the one before that, or the one before that, then I wouldn't have been on that call. Somebody needed to do it, so it was me. Am I the jerk for telling my father-in-law that he's not the man of the house? I, male 29, married into a family that consists of father, who's 62, mother, who's 53, and 4 daughters, who for the sake of the story, I'll call Anna, who's 32, Laura, who's 31, Jessica, 29, and my wife, Sarah, who's 28. All the sisters are now married, with me and my wife being the last ones to do so. My father-in-law worked all his life in blue-collar jobs, which is not bad, but he believes that blue collars are the only acceptable jobs for men, and since none of us work blue-collar, he's always making snide comments about how we are not real men. Mother-in-law and sisters are always excusing him, and for the most part, we let it go. Despite how father-in-law remarks how important it is for men to have manly jobs, the reality is he's always been kind of a moocher. He stopped working around 40, and my wife's maternal grandparents footed the bill for him and mother-in-law. Then they left them some inheritance, which they live off of with our occasional help. When the lockdown started, my in-laws' finances weren't great, so they burned through the inheritance faster than usual and eventually lost their home, so the family helped. First, they stayed with Jessica, who lived closest to them, then with Anna, and since April, they stayed with me and my wife, and it has been awful. This man will complain over your traditional stuff if he sees me cooking, cleaning, and anything that isn't repairing my own car. Also, he hasn't helped at all, doesn't pick up after himself, and expects to be served 24/7 in an instant. He demands to be fed first, as he's the man of the house. I hate this phrase, since he doesn't even do the chores that are manly, like taking out the trash or minor house repairs, and he has acted like this in the other houses he's stayed at. Last Friday, we had a small barbecue with my in-laws. Everyone arrived early to help, except father-in-law, and when he arrived,
He only complained everything was done wrong and how he could have done it better. But when given the chance, he always said,
It's not my job to teach you how to do a man's job.
So the four of us were really annoyed, and like always, the girls defended him. When it came time to eat, he demanded the biggest steak, as he was the head of the family. Anna's husband was serving, and he told him that he would give the biggest piece to Laura's husband since we were guests at his house. He flipped and demanded to be respected as the man of the house, so I simply said, "You're not the man of the house." This angered him even more, and finally I added, "And you haven't been in a while." That cut things short, and after eating, father-in-law and mother-in-law left to a hotel and demanded to stay with someone else because of my disrespect. My wife and sister-in-laws are super angry at me and say I should just understand he's from another time and not confront him. But my brothers-in-law say this is way past due and he needed the wake-up call. At the time, I felt justified, but with everyone angry, I feel like I may have overstepped. So Reddit, am I the jerk? Well, who do you think is the jerk? OP or father-in-law? Please let us know.
I'll give you the biggest steak anytime, Reddit boy.
You don't want me to serve you? No problem. So for a backstory, I work in a bakery and a medium-sized grocery store. Apart from baking and slicing and packaging breads, pies, and other pastries, I also have to clean all the dishes and clean my department floors when I work the closing shifts. A mid-shift worker also helps with the responsibilities until their shift ends, along with the department manager, who usually leaves a couple hours after my shift starts. A few weeks ago when I was working, I came from the back where we wash our dishes to help this lady, we'll call her B, who was standing near our counter by the bread slicer with an attitude. I'm assuming she was mad she had to wait because the mid-shift worker was busy with another customer. I came over and she tossed the bread on the counter and just said,
Slice this.
"Rough day? No problem. I just want to get her out of here." So politely say, "Yes, ma'am," and I grab a pair of gloves and start to put them on.
You're not going to wash your hands?
Me, "Oh, no ma'am, I already washed them before I came out here."
BS. I don't want you to touch my bread with those nasty hands.
Me, "I mean, I can wash them again if you want."
You know what? Don't bother.
She then goes to another department and asks for our department manager, and then starts yelling at him in front of the bakery and other people pointing at me, saying that I don't wash my hands and that I'm disgusting, and ends up calling me insulting names. My manager tries to calm her down and ends up washing his hands and cutting her bread to make her leave. I explain the situation to my manager, and he basically says, "Next time, just wash my hands by one of our sinks next to our front counter. But if she comes back and tries causing a scene again, to let him know, and he will tell her to leave." After talking to the store manager, he also told me the same thing. Fast forward to yesterday. Karen comes back later towards closing time, where both the mid-shift and department manager are both gone, so I'm the only one working in the bakery. She's holding bread to be sliced again and hasn't noticed it's me when she asks me to slice her bread until I reach out my hand to get the bread. She stops and says,
No, you're not helping me.
with a rude look on her face. I immediately smile and say, "No worries, have a nice night." And I walked to help another lady and then walked in the back to clean dishes. A few minutes later, I hear yelling,
Excuse me.
so I walk back up and say, "Yes, ma'am." She gives me another rude look and says,
Is no one going to help me?
Me, "No, ma'am, I'm the only one in the bakery."
Then wash your hands and slice my bread.
Me, "No, ma'am, I'm not serving you. I'm sorry. Have a nice night."
You are slicing my bread. You have to.
Me, "No, ma'am. You told me not to serve you. Have a nice night." And I walked in the back to clean more dishes. She ends up throwing her bread on the ground, and my store manager comes and tells her she needs to leave for causing a scene and threatens to call the police if she doesn't leave. So Karen leaves, but not without more screaming and name-calling. But she leaves. I tell my store manager what happened, and he told me I should have handled it better and that I instigated her to get her angry and to get a hold of him if that ever happened again. Whatever. It felt great.
Your manager makes me sick. Let's normalize not enabling Karens.
Bully customer is evicted and DNR'd. Oh boy. My property opened up a bit over a year ago. Being newly opened and in the midst of a lockdown, we were a little more generous on rate discounts, just to generate some revenue.
We had a guy who booked a few rooms for him and his work crew. Lifetime Shiny Rock. All of you working for Milton Properties probably already know. When they're LSR, they're either extremely cool or about as friendly as a hernia. This guy was absolutely the latter. So our friend, we'll call him the rate bully, initially booked for 3 nights, and we gave him a pretty discounted rate at the jump. I mean, we're talking like a $69 a night rate. This guy? Nope. He was at the desk 2 or 3 times a day to complain about something or to take something from the cooler that he insisted he didn't have to pay for. Pro tip, he did, and would always try to get his rate lowered. He stayed with us a few more times while we were getting our feet wet, and we kept giving him his reduced rate, and he just kept on bullying the staff for free stuff, lower rates, so on and so forth. 39-night booking he made. What now must be at least 7 months later. 2 rooms, $99 a night. Still a good rate. Spoke directly with our DOS and knew exactly what he was paying, what he agreed to, and what to expect. So what does he do? Checks in, immediately takes 6 sodas out of the cooler. I ask him if he wants to pay cash, card, or charge it to the room, and he says,
I'm LSR. This is free.
nope, we're going right into the same old behaviors. I inform him that he gets 2 complimentary waters and a select snack item per room every day, but everything else has to be paid for. He says he's taking the sodas, and if I charge him, he'll claim it as fraud. Bed. I charge them to his room, recap it to management, inform them what happened, and even pulled the camera footage to prove it. 15 minutes later, he wants to discuss his rate. Bully.
Yeah, I need my rate lowered.
Me. You're in for 39 nights at our extended stay rate of $99 a night. I can't lower it more.
Then make sure it's tax exempt.
Okay, I just need to copy your tax-exempt paperwork.
No, you don't. Fix my rate.
Yeah, I'm unable to without your paperwork.
The DOS has it.
But I don't. I literally cannot change it without those papers. You have to speak to DOS in the morning.
You're useless.
And he walks off. This guy goes through nearly this exact process every shift, every day, for the next 3 days. He also likes to tell us how his other crew is staying at a local mom and pop property for $59 a night, and we need to match it because his rate was lowered last time. Pro tip, the DOS did not have this paperwork because it didn't exist. On the 4th morning, our GM tells him flat out that we are not providing him a lowered rate. We are not making it tax exempt, and if he does not like that, he's free to leave and stay with another property. After he tries to size up and push around our 5'2" GM, she checks him out, gives him his receipt, and tells him he is no longer allowed on this property. 15 minutes to pack and vacate, or police are called. From what I was told, Buddy Boy knew he messed up and left with his tail between his legs. The moral of this story, don't be a chronic jerk to the staff of the hotel you stay at. You will not win. Am I the jerk for causing my husband to miss his trip by not packing his bag despite him repeatedly asking? My husband travels for work every few months. He's irresponsible with time and counts on others to do stuff for him using the "I'm tired" excuse. He's the breadwinner, by the way. He had a business trip, and the day of the trip, he saw me carrying the laundry basket and said, "Hey, can you pack my bag?" I asked why he didn't do it the night before, and he said he was up all night playing Fortnite. I asked why can't he pack it now, and he replied, "I gotta go catch up with the boys before I leave the country." I said no, and that he should do it himself. He asked why not, and I told him that I had to do the laundry, then cook for the kids, then help them with homework, then wash the rugs, then clean the messy bathroom, then the playing room, then work on my garden project. He stood there with his eyebrow lifted up as I went on. I suggested he stays home, pack his own bag, and helps around till it was time for his trip. He didn't like my suggestion and complained about missing the boys and wanting to see them one last time and say goodbye before he leaves. He begged, but I said no. He then suddenly went inside the bedroom. I thought he was packing, grabbed his phone, keys, and jacket, and rushed out. I just went about my day. It was 5 o'clock and he hadn't returned yet. I was concerned, thinking he had little time and still hadn't packed yet. He returned home at 6, walked into the bedroom, and started panicking, asking why his bag wasn't packed and ready yet. I told him he should ask himself since he stayed gone for hours. He said he was counting on me to pack his bag and even sent me a text hoping I'd eventually do it.
I didn't see the text, and even if I did, I never agreed, so he shouldn't have assumed I was going to pack his bag for him. He got upset and started panicking. His stuff was all over the place, and he couldn't even find his papers. He was finally done and left. I then got an angry call from him, asking if I was happy. I said, "Why? What happened?" And he said he missed his flight, just like I wanted. He came home and lost it, saying I cost him his business trip, which is supposed to earn him money, and made him look unreliable and unprofessional, and compromised his work after I refused to do him this small favor and pack his dang bag. I responded that he shouldn't have hung out with his buddies literally hours before his flight, but he said he believed this was done spitefully to get him to sit home with me. I was shocked. No words, just shocked face. He called his friend saying his trip didn't happen, then turned to me and said thanks to me, then proceeded to ask where they were going to meet for dinner. He told me, "No trip, meaning I'll be home for the next couple of weeks. Isn't that what you wanted? Great. We'll both now stay home and wallow in misery. God bless." Then walked out. Am I the jerk? He said I just caused him issues at work. Should I have packed his bag anyway? Why couldn't he be on the next flight? Because since he missed his flight that the company was paying for, he was required to pay for the other flight or not go. He refused to pay, saying it wasn't his fault anyway, and decided to not go. Am I the jerk for telling a professor that I am, in fact, a customer and do have the right to expect good service? I, 20 female, have one professor in particular who pretty much no one likes. Students can't stand him, and he has terrible student reviews, but I had to take his class if I want to graduate with honors in my chosen degree program. He's a very archaic professor, and his teaching methods are highly outdated. One thing he does is curving grades, which is when you artificially lower the grades of people who earned A's or B's to B's, C's, and D's just to make it so that only a few students are allowed to succeed, even if others earned a higher grade. It's basically just denying people the grade they earned after the fact for no reason other than so the professor can brag about how most students don't pass my class and almost none earn an A, and how my class is so hard. Our college's administration is extremely critical of the practice of curving and asks professors not to do so. It's considered even more ridiculous when the class isn't a STEM class. The administration allows students to file a request with a grading board if they've been graded unfairly by professors to resolve the issues in grading. My professor graded me completely unfairly on a recent assignment. First, he gave everyone in class the answer to a particular question on the assignment, which he designed incorrectly, so he was just giving them the points due to his mistake. I wasn't in class because I had a cough, and he never told me about the answer he gave to everyone. So on the assignment, I was unfairly docked several points because he didn't tell me the answer he gave away to the whole class when I was forced to miss class. The administration would consider this an unequal playing field. All students are supposed to have an equal chance at scoring well on assignments. Missing these points lowered my grade to the borderline between an A and B, and then the professor curved the grades, so my grade was artificially lowered to a B, so that he could brag about how only this many people got A's on my recent assignment. The whole situation was unfair start to finish. I never even had a fair chance to do well. I argued heatedly with him about it, and he said nastily to me, "Youth these days, you all think the customer is always right, but you aren't customers, and you don't have the right to a certain level of service." To which I corrected him, "Actually, I am by definition a customer. I don't pay $80,000 per year to be cheated out of the grade I rightfully earned. I've already decided I'm never asking this guy for a recommendation for anything, so I have nothing to lose at this point. I'm escalating this to the grading board to have them review what happened so I can salvage my grade. Am I the jerk? Am I the jerk for not sharing my prize money with my husband? My husband and I have been married for 10 years. We're not in the US. A few weeks ago, I saw a competition that we would both qualify for and told him about it. He said he wasn't interested in it, so I said I would do submissions for both of us anyway to increase my chances of winning. Lo and behold, he won and got $5,000. Initially, he said that he would put the money towards some home repairs, but then he changed his mind and decided to keep the money. I asked him how much he was giving to me, and he said none because he has bills to pay. I was annoyed, but left it alone. Fast forward to last week, and I won the $50,000 grand prize. When I told him, he was ecstatic and started talking about what he would do with his portion of the money. I stopped him and told him I have plans for the money and he's not getting any of it. I'm putting $10,000 to get the repairs done. Some will go to savings and the rest will pay off my loan. He got upset, and when I reminded him that he didn't share his prize with me, he said I'm being unfair because I got a lot more than he did. Honestly, I would have shared mine 50-50 with him, but his behavior when he won just rubbed me the wrong way. So, am I wrong for not giving him any of my prize money? I think I may be the jerk because I did get a significantly larger amount of money, and me not sharing it is kind of punishment for him not sharing his before. Edit. 1. He used his prize money to purchase workout equipment, shoes, and some was put towards his credit card. The weights he bought are in a higher weight category, so I won't be using them. 2. For those suggesting divorce, this is the first time he's acted selfish in that way, and it will be discussed to ensure we're on the same page moving forward. Yeah, my initial response was petty, but I'm human and I was hurt. 3. Our finances are separate. We have joint long-term savings and another account for emergency funds. We each get our salaries in individual accounts and pay what we have to from there. We both have access to each other's accounts should the need arise. You want me to call every foul? You got it. I just remembered this as I was watching my kid play soccer. Back in high school, I worked for the parks and recreation for my town. One year, they needed some more referees for the Little League soccer matches. I needed the money, and it worked with my schedule, so I signed up. We went through all the rules, so we knew what to call and how to whistle and all those things. But we were refereeing for 6- and 7-year-olds, so we weren't expected to treat it like a higher league match. A little bit into the season, I was reffing for a game, and the kids were having a good time, but they're having little violations pretty consistently. I made the decision I wasn't going to call every single one, only if it was pretty blatant, like they used their hands, or if they grabbed someone and shoved them out of the way or something like that. And that seemed to be working just fine. Until the parents. A few families had parents like what you see on TV, screaming at their kid and telling them to be super aggressive and all of that. After a bit, some of the parents start yelling at me. Did you see that? Or, come on ref, open your eyes, etc. I wasn't about to get into it, so at first I ignored them. Then, when that didn't work, I started just kind of shrugging or nodding or whatever. And then these few parents started to get pretty aggressive, so I turned and said something like, they're 7 years old, they're going to make a bunch of fouls and stuff. If I call every single one, they're not going to even be able to play. And then the parents are like, do your job. Trigger malicious compliance. I called every single thing for the rest of the game, which was like 30 more minutes at that point. Those poor kids had the whistle blowing every 10 seconds and they barely got to play. It felt awful for me to do it to these poor kids who just wanted to play, but it felt delicious to have it blow up in the parents' faces. At the end of the match, everyone was in a bad mood and the poor kids just sort of slumped off the field. The next time I refereed that team, I was back to my old way of doing things and had no complaints this time. So I guess it all worked out for the kids in the long run. Am I the jerk for being upset about my wife not telling me that our joint savings was slowly going down? We, male 48 and female 45, have been married for 25 years. 3 kids, all educated at private schools, and now adults. Nice house in a good area, nice cars, and have enjoyed overseas and local holidays, etc. My wife likes high-end bags like LV and Hermes. She has a few LV. I am genuinely okay with her hobby as it makes her happy. Wife stopped working at 25 to be a stay-at-home mom, but went back to work for 6 years, but gave it up to return to being a stay-at-home mom. I have run my own business for 20 years, and because of a slowdown in my sector because of lockdown, I've taken a job as a bus driver to make ends meet. I have sold $18,000 worth of guitars to survive the previous 3 months. I called the bank to get mortgage relief for the next 3 months, and the same for the credit cards, so we can exist until a new project starts for my business in December. Then we're back to a good situation again. My wife manages the home finances. Here's the thing, we have always had joint accounts for mortgage, credit, and savings. That's how we do it. Well, at least I thought so. You see, my wife is a great eBay seller and makes excellent margins on what she sells. This morning, we discussed the savings account. It's dropped from $27,000 to $5,000 due to the tougher times resulting from lockdown. I wasn't aware of the drop from about the $10,000 mark because I put together a tough budget that's achievable and thought we were good. I got the surprise of my life this morning when my wife said that the savings account was low,
but her eBay sales were good, as she had $3,000 that was going towards her planned Hermes Birkin, around $12,000. My wife then suggested we go for a walk and grab a coffee. Well, during the walk, I just lost it, after thinking for a few minutes about her lack of communication and common sense. I did blow up, and we cut the walk short. Apparently, I'm the jerk for losing it. Now I figure I should set up my own account, have my pay sent to this, and ask her to pay half of all expenses. Am I the jerk? Karen tries to force me to sell my house and give her the proceeds. My stepchildren's mother wants me to sell my home so that they can receive 50% of the proceeds. I am refusing. She has told me that I'm hurting my late husband's kids and that I'm the jerk. My late husband, David, had 2 kids, Thomas and Megan. Their mother, Kelly, had primary custody, with David getting the kids every other weekend. Kelly was just a joy, dragging David into court at every opportunity. If David found $1 on the street, Kelly would drag him into court to get her fair share. David always took care of his kids, paying not just his child support, but also much more. When David and I decided to build our home, we set up what would happen if one of us passed before the other. Basically, the survivor would get the house, but when the survivor passed or sold the home, 50% of the proceeds would go to their designated heirs. For David, it was his kids. For me, it was my sister. We were both contributing equally to the new home. Then, in 2018, David decided to change jobs, and he was taking 2 weeks off between the end of his old job and the start of his new one. David had almost all of his insurance, including life insurance, through his employer. We lost him in an accident a week before he was to start his new job. David had a will that left his savings. We kept our finances separate, and his 401k to his kids, but there wasn't a large amount. There was no life insurance. We did have mortgage insurance, so when David passed, the house was paid off. Kelly hated me and did everything she could to make her kids do so as well. So it was no surprise we didn't have any contact after David passed. I was surprised when Kelly reached out to me a couple of weeks ago. She said that she and the kids are struggling financially since she ended up having to close down her business in 2020. She is working now, but at a low-paying call center job. She wants me to sell the house so that half of the proceeds would go to the kids, and she can use that for their education and medical expenses. According to Kelly, Megan is having medical issues and needs treatment that her insurance does not cover and Kelly cannot afford. I said no, I was not selling my home. Honestly, I could care less what Kelly thinks. She has been a jerk to me since the day I met her. However, David's parents, whose opinion I do respect, also called to say that they believe it is what David would have wanted. I told them I would think about it. I know my husband loved his kids more than anything and would have done anything for them. Right now, living without rent or a mortgage, I am on track to retire very early. I have decided I am not giving that up. His parents told me that David would be ashamed of me for being a selfish jerk, which I admit hurt to hear. Am I the jerk? Entitled friends lose it on me because I don't want to have kids. As a 27-year-old male, I have many friends with kids, mostly in the toddler age group, as well as many friends without kids, like myself. Now, don't get me wrong. I love being the fun friend / uncle / friend uncle, but I've always stood firm in my decision not to have kids. To that end, most of my friends with kids have grown to accept that, and we just don't bring it up. No cause to, right? I think my friends just expect that one day, I and whoever I may be courting will announce a pregnancy, to which end I know they'll be disappointed, but that's okay. See, being a single, childless young man, I naturally have quite a bit more freedom in life than my friends with kids. I can still live life on a whim. They can't. I can roughly predict what the next 2 weeks will hold. They can't. If I want to have kids later in life, I can reverse that decision, would likely adopt. They can't. To that end, most of my friends with kids are still wholesome and loving friends. They love to see me traveling to exotic places, and they adore the small trinkets and lengthy stories I bring home with me. One set of friends, however, has shown their true colors lately. See, over the past few years, I've helped them left, right, and center financially. I don't mind because they have mouths to feed and I know how it feels to struggle, so I don't want to see my friends and their kids doing the same. The most notable expense was the $1,800 I shelled out to literally buy them a running vehicle. Bear that in mind, that $1,800 will be important later. The friends in question have a 3-year-old together, and the girlfriend has a 9-year-old from a previous relationship.
This couple in particular has turned very bitter to me lately, almost as soon as they found out that I'm planning a month-long trip to Brazil in June. My friends immediately responded by saying in a disgusted voice,
You should have been saving that money so you can buy a house and start a family.
and I replied, I have no interest in reproducing, and I'm not ready to set an anchor. We've discussed that. And his girlfriend pipes in,
Yeah, whatever. Must be nice to just fly all over the world. Maybe one day you'll know what it's like to be responsible instead of only thinking about you.
Excuse me? I've worked my fingers to the bone to save for this vacation and all my previous voyages. And to that end, I'm not done yet. I've been strictly budgeting my money for over a year to make this happen. I even gave up both cigarettes and soda to save a few more dollars per week. No restaurants, no buying video games, basically nothing outside of the essentials. I work more hours per week than both of them combined. Not judging, they have kids to take care of. But still, I earned this. And then for them to act like I'm a lesser man because I didn't accidentally reproduce right out of high school? To me, that was both laughable and pathetic. Now, even at this point, I had chalked it up to, okay, they resent me for it in the moment. I guess I understand that. Because I know that neither of them has ever gotten to do such a thing. And I do feel somewhat like a jerk that they have to watch me fly off to Brazil knowing they can't afford to do much because, well, raising kids is expensive. But then they take it a massive step further and ask me to borrow $3,000 so they too can do something this summer. She even whipped out her phone and pulled up the resort they wanted to stay at on Table Rock Lake in Missouri. As soon as I noticed she had entered the info for a 14-day stay totaling $2,400, I realized they had planned to ask for this money all along. I was honestly speechless for a moment. So eventually I said something along the lines of, Look man, I've been saving for this for over a year. I can't afford to loan any of that money out, or I won't be able to afford to go on my vacation. And to be honest, I still have to recoup that $1,800 I loaned y'all before my plans are even back in the green. So I'm sorry, but the answer is no. And they just lost it.
All you single jerks ever think about is yourself. You have no idea what it's like. We never get to do anything. Some friend you are. You'd rather go off by yourself than help our kids have a good summer.
At that point, I simply left without another word. It is clear to me now that all I ever was a piggy bank. In truth, I guess it was my fault for being proud of my frugality and occasionally mentioning my savings like, hey man, I hit $10,000 today, 2/3 of the way there. This all happened last weekend, and even today I received another text.
Are you sure we can't all just go to the lake together? The kids really need this. It's not like you can't go to Brazil another time.
And this, my friends, has been a hastily written and hurtful example of entitlement. Takeaways. 1. Don't discuss your finances with anyone that isn't directly affiliated with them, yourself and or your partner. Maybe your parents, but not your friends. 2. Never loan money to friends. Treat it as a gift that you will not see returned. If you do see it returned, treat it as a nice surprise. 3. Thank you for reading, and feel free to share discourse or similar stories in the comments. X tells me to move out while she's on a work trip because the guy she cheated on me with is moving in. I get very creative moving out. I did this to an ex who asked me to move out while she was on a work trip and told me she was coming back with her new boyfriend. We were still together when she left. I got these little noisemakers, battery-powered ones the size of a quarter that emit sounds at just the right volume that you aren't sure if you really heard it. So quiet that two people could be sitting in an average-sized room, and while one can barely hear it, the other wouldn't hear a thing. They last ages and fit perfectly in light fixtures and in wall outlets. I got a box of 20 of them for like $100 on eBay and got so creative all over the house. Her car, I even hid them in a boat her father got her. Rich family, and she grew up sailing. Now, these little things make a noise at complete random intervals. Could be minutes, could be hours, could take a whole day off. They cycle noises like kids laughing, breathing, a whistle, scratching noises, some other ones I can't remember, but you get the idea. It was so unpredictable, it was near impossible for someone to just figure it out. Months go by. I get a new place, get my life back up. Now we had a few friends in common, and one of them I kept up with. They were kinda sour about how she ended things, but they had grown up together and kept up their friendship, loosely talking and catching up on occasion. I never really asked about her, but one day we get to talking, and he's wanting to prank some friends on a camping trip, so I tell him about the noisemakers. As I'm telling him about them, he slowly starts making a face. He's got this huge grin on his face and asks me, "You put these in your ex's house, didn't you?" And when I admit, he starts laughing hysterically. Turns out her new boyfriend had only lasted a few months and had left, telling her that he couldn't handle whatever was going on with them and their mental states. Turns out, for a while, they had both heard things, and sometimes only one would hear them, which gave the illusion that something was really messing with them, going on in their heads at different times. They couldn't figure it out, and eventually he wanted out completely. He even thought that maybe there was a worm in his brain or something. It was amazing. I hadn't expected to hear anything about it. I rode that train for weeks. She moved out, told her parents she didn't want the house and to give it to her brother or sell it. Wouldn't tell them why. I always tell people who ask about her that I hold no grudge, and don't tell them the part where I totally messed with her so bad that I overshot the get her back stage and hit the blissful state of satisfied with my work. My wife knows this story by heart because it's her favorite one to tell. Am I the jerk for escorting my niece home after she messed with my daughter's doll? I, 34 female, have a daughter who's 11 and a niece who's 7 that lives about 5 houses down from us. My daughter has a decently sized collection of dolls, ranging from American Girl to Baby Alive. She loves all of her dolls dearly and takes very good care of them and understands how precious her more expensive dolls are. Her favorite doll is an American Girl doll with very curly hair that needs to be taken care of gently. So whenever her cousin comes over, she puts her up on a high shelf in her room and is very clear in saying that she cannot and will not play with her dolls on the high shelf. She paid for this doll entirely by herself, so it has lots of sentimental value as well. I don't find her behavior bad, and I'm happy she's setting a boundary, so as long as my daughter's rule is followed, I don't interfere. Yesterday, her cousin came over to play as she usually does on the weekends. Everything was going as usual until I heard my daughter screaming. I went upstairs to find her doll clutched in her hands with straight hair and a brush in her niece's hand. Turns out my daughter left to go use the bathroom, and my niece climbed her nightstand to get her favorite doll and wanted to do her hair. I comforted my daughter, first telling her that this was a fixable thing and that I'd put her doll's hair in rollers and she'd be fine. I sent her off to her dad so that he could take over while I took over with my niece. I tried to explain to her why touching the doll without my daughter's permission was not right, especially after she had been told multiple times not to was rude. My niece insisted my daughter was a bully for not letting her play with it and wouldn't budge. So I called my sister to make sure an adult was home, packed my niece's things, and walked her home. Before we left, I explained to her that she could not touch things that belonged to other people if they asked her not to, and that she could come play again if she apologized. At the door, I explained to my other sister, who was at their home at the time of what happened. I told her I'd call my sister later, and that was that for the time being. Today, my sister called me after I left her a voicemail and a text thread explaining everything. She told me her daughter cried, saying aunt and cousin were both bullying her, and proceeded to call my daughter's doll a stupid toy, and that my daughter should have just let her play with it in the first place. I continued to try and tell her my side, but she also wouldn't listen. I'm not really sure what to do. I've gotten lots of mixed opinions on the whole situation from friends and family. I kind of just want a verdict. Complain about not getting free hits even though you had the advantage? You just cost your team a place in the grand final. Context: I'm a field hockey umpire. Generally, if someone has been fouled, but they are able to retain possession or have a chance to score a goal, I'm allowed to call play on if there is sufficient advantage. Story: I was umpiring a semifinal. There was a certain person we'll call Bob who would constantly complain that he was getting fouled all the time. Bob was a very good player, so the opposition would always gang up on him when he had the ball. Because he was very skilled, a lot of the time when he was fouled, he was able to dribble past the opposition and get the ball into his attacking area or be able to have a shot on goal. As I already mentioned, Bob was a complainer. He'd constantly cry about the free hits he should have been awarded, while completely disregarding the fact that he had gained the advantage and even scored a goal when I let play go on after he was fouled. At halftime, his team were losing 2-1. Bob comes up to me and starts ranting about how useless my umpiring is and that I missed lots of fouls on him. I assured him that I saw those fouls, but I let play go on and that he gained sufficient advantage, so I was confused as to why he was complaining. He then said, "You have to call every foul." I said, Okay, I'll make sure that I call every foul. Malicious compliance mode activated. During the second half, I made sure that I called every foul for Bob's team, regardless if they had the advantage or not. They then had to bring the ball back to the spot of the foul. Meanwhile, it gave the opposition time to get back and organize their defense. His teammates were getting very frustrated, but he was content knowing he had got his way. Until there were about 3 minutes left in the game. Bob had the ball at the top of the circle. He was about to have a shot on the goal when the opposition fouled him. When his stick was swung back, I blew my whistle as quickly as I could. Then half a second later, he hit the foul ball and it goes sailing into the net. Because I had already blown my whistle, I had stopped play and the goal was not allowed. Bob was irate. He came storming towards me, yelling, "Why didn't you play the advantage?" I replied, "You said I had to call every foul, and that's exactly what I've been doing this entire second half. That was a foul, so I called it." Bob continues ranting and starts losing it, so I told him I wasn't tolerating his dissent and gave him a yellow card, 5-minute suspension, meaning he was going to miss out on the last few minutes of the game. His team were still losing 2-1. If I had let the advantage play, the score would have been 2-2, and the game might have gone into extra time, meaning that his team would have had a chance to win and take part in the next week's grand final. But because I maliciously complied with his request and Bob's team were down to 10 men, he had to sit and watch his team lose the game and their place in the grand final, all because he wouldn't let me play advantage. Edit. Just to clarify, it's not part of the rules that I have to play advantage. It is just something I can do to keep the game flowing. If someone doesn't want me to play advantage, I am able to oblige. I forgot to mention this, but Bob was the captain of his team. I'm not allowed to talk to the whole team during a game. I can only communicate to the whole team through the captain, and since Bob was the captain, he was speaking for the whole team. I didn't know that Bob was going to score with that shot on goal. I was blowing my whistle quickly to all fouls, and unfortunately for him, that shot ended up going in the net. Am I the jerk for reading at home with my husband? I enjoy reading books, but my husband feels that it is rude for me to read when we are both home because I'm ignoring him. To be clear, this does not happen in excess by anyone's definition. I have read a maximum of 5 entire books since we got together a decade ago, primarily to avoid upsetting him. We have very similar work schedules. Recently, I bought a book that was the first in a series of 3, and it started this argument to a higher degree than usual because of the fact that it is a series. I've considered going to a cafe and reading in my car, but that seems like a waste of gas when I could just read at home where it's more comfortable anyway. But doing so requires that I tell him I'm about to start reading in the study or the bedroom, etc., and that I expect not to be interrupted for the next 30 minutes to an hour, which is what I intend to do if the results here favor me. Though this will absolutely upset him because he approaches me for comment or to tell stories every 10 to 15 minutes on average. So, am I the jerk? Edit. Wow, I got a ton of feedback. I'll add a few things here. 1. He does the same thing with headphones, but aside from expecting me to be available for immediate comment, he does not mistreat me in any way. I have friends that I see regularly. I can choose to leave the house without question. I have full access to all financial accounts. I make semi-substantial financial choices. Example, a weekend getaway with friends or buying a new office desk without permission or guilt. This does not involve yelling, but there are guilt trips. They are framed just as what I have expressed here, that he feels ignored and it's rude. 2. He works totally alone, and I do think that it is a source of his understandable need for lots of evening and weekend interaction. I just feel this request is an inappropriate expression of that need. 3. No, he doesn't have many friends. Just one, really. Otherwise, it's mostly just my family that he spends time with. His doesn't live nearby, but he gets along really well with mine, and they all genuinely enjoy each other's company. 4. Yes, we do have pets. 5. Yes, he has hobbies, but they're easy for him to pick up and put down without notice. Lots of household projects, carpentry, etc. No, he does not like to watch sports or play video games. 6. We both already have therapists who we have seen bi-weekly for years. It's mainly been individual therapy, aside from an approximate 6-month period of couples therapy during a time of crisis in 2019. 7. Yes, he is able to read, but he has some mild insecurities about his intellectual abilities. Am I the jerk for not wanting to pay my sister-in-law or sister my inheritance? My parents passed in an accident last year. In the days following the accident, after having found the substantial life insurance policies but no will, we agreed to split everything between my bro, sis, and I.
I'm 27, brother is 28, sister is 34. In the weeks after, my aunt and uncle reached out to help with the process. My brother's wife insisted we keep everything between ourselves because situations like this can tear families apart when money gets involved. My sister-in-law jumped in and organized estate appointments. My brother quit his job to become the executor of my parents' estates, and everyone moved into my parents' house, where I was staying, to help me. My sister quit her job shortly after. We all agreed to sort out the financial stuff later and focused on surviving and mourning. I have chronic illness and live in America. Sister-in-law stepped in to help me pay for medicine, $120 a month at the clinic. In 6 months, we were selling my parents' house. My siblings had tallied every expense, including their loss of wages, and sent me a $60,000 bill. Then inheritances were paid out. My brother and I got more than my sister. My brother and sister-in-law came up with a plan to give my sister some from each inheritance to equalize it. While my bro did estate stuff, my sister-in-law contacted realtors to help sell the other properties my parents owned. Now we're selling the final property, and sister-in-law proposed to make it equal between all of us for all the work she put in, where we divide up the money from the house 4 ways. Me, my bro, my sis, and my sister-in-law each get 1/4. She also added to this plan, if anyone did not show up to agreed upon work days for repairs, 1% of their share per day would be taken and divided between the other 3. I could not make it to all the work days due to that pesky chronic illness I mentioned before. I offered to come by the house to work on it when they weren't present, but they all agreed that didn't count because how could they know I had done any work? It's time to sign the final papers to sell the house, and I made my intent to not give anyone any extra money clear. I only feel I need to pay my sister-in-law for medicine. My reasoning is if they are going to nickel and dime me, then perhaps the loving family relationships I had always wanted don't actually exist, and they're all in this for themselves. To me, they've made it clear that they aren't and weren't interested in any relationship with me beyond what they could get. Sister is now texting my aunt, who doesn't like sister-in-law helping this much, to butt out and saying I am in a manic episode. I'm not bipolar. Am I the jerk for not accommodating my brother's vegan fiance? Full disclosure, I do eat meat, eggs, and dairy. That being said, I'm lazy, and prepping and cooking meat takes a lot more work than I'm willing to do a lot of the time. So I've built up a pretty okay repertoire of vegetarian and vegan meals. That's why I volunteered to cook last night for a small family dinner, even though I would normally never. Love my mom to bits, but if the first step isn't browning a pound of ground beef, she's a little lost on what to make. This is all a thing because my brother has recently gotten engaged to a vegan woman. None of us have really spent a lot of time with her due to lockdown and generally having our own lives. The time I have spent with her has been perfectly nice. I thought this would also be perfectly nice, so I did my best. I put together a Dijon vinaigrette salad, pasta tossed with roasted asparagus and cherry tomatoes, and because this is America, where carb on carb doesn't have to just be a dream, some bread I vetted to make sure it didn't have milk or eggs in it. She could eat every single thing served. At least, I thought so. We sit down, plates are dished, she has questions. Whatever, fair enough. I can imagine that she's been in situations where things seemed safe to eat, but surprise, there's honey in the salad dressing or something. Reassurances are made, I did my homework, but she has other complaints. You roasted the veggies in olive oil? There's olive oil in the dressing salad? The pasta isn't whole wheat? This is white bread? Yes, vegan, all of it, but not stripped down to as few calories as possible. And now she won't eat. She just sat there and tore one of the rolls up into tiny pieces until the table was cleared. My brother texted me later that night about how messed up it was that she had to go home hungry, and this is where I may have been the jerk. I replied something in the effect of saying, I thought I had to cook to accommodate veganism, not an eating disorder. He told me to go forget myself, which again, fair. Now I imagine a storm is brewing, and mom is inevitably going to get sucked in. I also could have tried to make something healthier, though I don't think what was served was that bad. Am I the jerk? The time my buddy left a loaded semi-truck halfway across the country. For background, my buddy is now my husband's best friend. They met while overseas and have been best friends and roommates on and off basically until we bought our own home. They're basically brothers and quite the package deal. Anyway, I'll call my buddy Mac.
Mac was an over-the-road trucker at the time that this happened and was working for an entry-level company. Those companies have their place since they help people acquire a CDL and the first year or two of experience so that other companies will be able to accept you. Insurance reasons mostly. Unfortunately, the downside to companies like these are as follows. 1. Inexperienced drivers. 2. Many of the instructors are also fairly inexperienced. 3. Pay is mediocre for industry standards. 4. The dispatchers often ask for unreasonable and undrivable tasks. Don't award home time very easily, and you're basically just a number. We generally put up with companies like this at first to get our feet wet and gain those precious miles and years to make us more hireable down the road, so to speak. Anyway, Mac had been driving for this company for approximately a year when he was at the time halfway across the country from his home base when he got a phone call. His best friend, my current husband, was in the hospital with a potentially fatal infection. Mac immediately called dispatch to inform them that he was making an immediate U-turn and heading straight home. Here's where the compliance comes in. They told him that if he deviates from his route in any way, that he would be fired immediately. They didn't care that he might lose his best friend and told him to suck it up and do his job. He said, "Fine, I quit." He pulled over at the nearest truck stop, parked the truck thousands of miles from his home base, and left it. He cleaned it out and took a Greyhound home, if memory serves. His old company had to have his tractor and fully loaded trailer towed thousands of miles. Not only that, but they were late on the precious delivery of what was on his trailer. Let me tell you, nothing about that is cheap. Mac now works for a smaller, family-owned company and is home daily, or at least every weekend, and is paid much better. Am I the jerk for supporting my son and leaving a job for a better offer, leaving his current employer in the lurch? My son is 14 and works a paper round in the mornings before school and at the weekends. The owner of the news agent hasn't always treated him fairly, in my opinion. Example, guilt tripping when he's not well and can't work, which has only happened a couple of times in the year and a half he's been there. He's also sent some pretty harsh text messages when my son made the occasional mistake with his deliveries. Again, the mistakes were rare. The owner is also terminally ill. There seems to be a shortage of paper girls and boys at the moment, and as such, when my son went into another news agent to pick up a few groceries whilst wearing his paper bag, he was approached by the manager and given an offer. The pay is better, the round is shorter and closer to home, and he would get Saturdays off, which he currently doesn't have. So I've been encouraging my son to go for it, trying to take the opportunity to teach him about labor supply and demand, and how he should look after his own interests first when it comes to the world of work, understand his value, etc. He decided to take the new job, and I suggested he give 2 weeks' notice to his current employer, during which he'd do his best to ease the transition by offering to help with spreading the word about the vacancy, showing the new person the round, etc. His boss has not taken it well, practically begging him to stay, saying he'll pay more, give him a shorter local round, apologizing for the way he's spoken to him, etc. He has also called myself and my wife to try and convince our son to reconsider and that it's impossible to find kids to work, etc. I'm of the opinion that my son should stick to his decision and leave. 2 weeks' notice is very reasonable. He could have just walked out then and there. Accepting counteroffers is a poor choice and should only be done in exceptional circumstances, and certainly not in an unskilled entry-level role like this. A good manager would gracefully accept a resignation and wish the employee well in their future career. The employee isn't responsible for the business not being able to cope without them. He's 14 years old, for crying out loud. Dear Reddit, am I the jerk here? Oh, okay. I'll move the truck, Mom. I am a 22-year-old female. I live with my parents, but I'm moving out in a couple of weeks, so my mother and I have been bumping heads a lot. The biggest thing we fight about is my clothes and my sleep. Recently, it's been more about my sleep than anything else. I go into work at 2 p.m. every day at my full-time job, so I'm there relatively late. When I get home, I like to decompress, play video games, watch TV, work out, and make something light to eat. I don't always do all of these things in the same day, but what I'm getting at is I stay up late. I get off around 11, home by 11:15, and I won't go to sleep until around 3 or 4 in the morning. The latest being 4 if I'm with my boyfriend. She wakes me up every day from between 6 a.m. to 9 a.m., but it's never just once. She'll do it 2 to 4 times in the morning until I can't go back to sleep and I'm mad. She doesn't even wake me up for important things. It's either to complain at me or make me do something for her. I've asked her time and time again to stop waking me up. I have a hard time going back to sleep.
Could you please just let me sleep until 11 a.m. and when I'm up, I'll do what you need me to do? But she never listens. Well, currently she's been having work done on her house. The workers are in their final stages, so they're just painting the house. Well, once again, she woke me up at 7:30 a.m. today by barging into my room to move her truck because the workers are here. I groan, get up, and throw on a nightgown she doesn't like. We've had several fights about this nightgown because it's short, even though it's long enough to cover everything it needs to. I looked at myself in the mirror and thought about changing, but instead I smirked and thought to myself, if you can't respect my boundaries, why am I going to respect yours? I keep the nightgown on. I walk out of my room, move the truck, and go back inside. As soon as she sees me while I'm walking back to my room, she starts screaming.
Tatwang uterus, you went outside like that? Why do you hate me?
She's standing in front of me, trying to block my way from going to my room. I duck underneath her arms and ignore her. My mother starts following me while yelling about me living with her and my father, so I can't be dressing like that around their house, especially when my father and working men are around. I get into my room, close the door, and I'm about to lay back down, and she swings my door open, still trying to argue with me.
I can't believe you would embarrass me like that. Put on some clothes. We're talking.
I laugh in her face and close the door on her. She attempts to reopen the door, so I grab the handle. I'm not allowed locks on my door. Dude, no, we're not even talking. You're just yelling. The truck is moved. Please leave me alone. She starts sobbing about how everyone is so mean to her. She hates her life and stomps off to call my dad to complain about me. Do this next. Tap here on your screen to come see our new podcast playlist, where you'll find thousands of hours of the best stories you've ever heard.
Or tap the one on the right. That episode is specifically just for you, based on other videos you've enjoyed the most.